Did you hear what I said?
We are now, Andy. I see it in my top left corner.
Yes, we are. So I think if
Okay.
we might.
Oh, okay. All right, good. Thank you. Sorry, that was I forgot to ask earlier. My fault. Okay. So we can move on to student council update.
Yep, just give me a second to transition people out as presenters.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
And now I'm going to invite Quentin in.
Okay.
Quentin's going to join us again. Hey, Quentin, thank you for joining us again. I know you were just with us a couple weeks ago. We're glad to have you here for another student council update.
Of course. Thank you so much for letting me back. This is great.
Anytime.
First off, we'll start with what we started today, actually. Today we started Kindness Week. We thought it was a great connection to our theme that I told you guys about last time, which was spread kindness, not germs. We've organized Kindness Week before for the past couple of years, and it's always gone well. We've always just tried to make a difference for everybody, because you never know what somebody's going through, whether they have family sicknesses, they're dealing with academic or emotional stress, or they're just having a rough day. So we always thought having Kindness Week was just one big positive that they could have. So it started today with cohort B. It's today and tomorrow for cohort B, and then next week for Monday and Tuesday it's going to be for cohort A. On yesterday, 14 students from our club came to the school to prepare for the week and decorate the school. We posted positive messages on a sticky note from all around the school on the lockers, and created pass it on clothespins and smile cards and teacher and staff appreciation cards. The pass it on clothespins have small positive quotes, examples like "you got this, keep working hard." We put all these clothespins. We're going to put them on students' backpacks to spread kindness and positive messaging around the school. Students are then encouraged to pass it on to somebody else through their cohort. So you take it, you put it on their backpack. They might not even notice it until about a half hour to an hour later when they look at their backpack and they see the clothespin. They read it and it says, "Keep going, you're doing great." And sometimes that just helps somebody. Maybe they're taking a test or something like that and they need that little push. And then they read on the back, it says pass it on. So then they grab it, and while they're in the hallways or they're in class, they go quickly, just go put it on somebody else's backpack, not have to interact with them or get too close to them, and just put it on so that somebody else feels the same exact way that they might need it. We also created smile cards. Those are going to be for Friday and Tuesday. And those smile cards just say, "I love your smile, pass it on, thank you for participating in Kindness Week." Smile cards we've done multiple times in the past. The clothespin pass it on clothespins are brand new. We just started that this year because we thought maybe that was going to be easier than having to give it to somebody right away. And we know that we can't see each other smile with the masks on. We understand that, but we all can see people just need that little compliment, whether they know it or not, whether they think they need it or not. Having that little compliment, just saying, "I love your smile," feels nice. And all of them are actually laminated so that they can all be disinfected. That was our big thing. We knew that we couldn't have too many people touching it with their hands. So we thought if we laminated it, they would all be easier for people to disinfect it. Lastly, we hand wrote each signed faculty card, each written for a teacher, faculty member, anything like that. And we placed them all in their mailboxes because you know how difficult it has been for everyone between remote and hybrid teaching. And we appreciate all the hard work they're doing every day.
Very good.
Thank you. And then next month, of course, we are working with Helping Our Troops, which is out of Stoneham, Massachusetts, for creating the boxes. Last year, we were able to donate and assemble 63 packages for the troops. And then this year, we're hoping that we can get 100 care packages.
That's great.
Yeah. Every period 1 class, grades 8 through 12 and grades 6 through 7, homeroom will receive an empty box and instructions listing what to be collected and donated. We hope that every class and homeroom will make at least 1 care package, with the hope of classes and home making more than one. We always hope that they always make more than one if they can, with how much they bring in. We're also leaving donation bins in the Carver Middle High School main office for students that don't have homerooms like myself. I have senior internship, so I don't come in until later, so I can bring it in there so that it can go to other homerooms so they can create boxes. We are also going to be putting a box in the post office in the center of town, right under the mail slips, and it's going to be inside, and it's going to be right as soon as you walk into the post office. It would be right there, just so we can be able to have people from all around the community be able to donate. And we're going to publicize this on the Carver Chronicles, which is our newspaper for the school, so our social medias, through parents, and hopefully on Carver Helping Carver.
Do you have an exact date when the boxes are going to be out in the
Yes.
post office?
The dates for the fundraiser is it starts November 30th, and it's going to end on Friday, December 18th. And then I'm going to go in every single week to collect it from every box.
Great. That's great. Was that the end of was that the last item?
Yes, it is.
That's great. Great
I have a
stuff.
question. Yeah, very good. It was a lot of, I like the kindness week. I like them all, really. I have a question for you about the boxes.
Yes.
Do you know where these are going exactly? Like, are these all going overseas, or these?
So I don't exactly know, because once we give it to the Helping Our Troops, they're going to send troops themselves. But it's always good, because you can also write messages if you'd like. You can always write letters for the troops. And so no matter where they are, they can always just get a nice note saying that we're thankful for them, because we know that they're going through something totally different. And they're fighting masks, and they're running around, and it's not easy.
That's right. Well, no, I was just curious to see if maybe the students were assigned a certain unit or certain soldiers in a certain area, to get to learn about that area and the conflict they're in, or their mission. But that's great. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
All right, does anybody have any questions or comments for Quentin?
I'll just say that I was at the Carver Middle High School today, and I saw a lot of the sticky notes on the lockers with the positive messaging. And I didn't think to ask Scott or Mike where they came from, but I noticed them, and I thought to myself, like, oh, that's so nice that somebody put sticky notes up and that the kids aren't tearing them down. So it's nice to know where that initiative came from. And I don't know if it's helping your fellow students, but it made me smile. Nobody could tell because I had a mask on. But.
Yeah, that's always our plan. We always try and just, whether somebody's not going to get the clothespin or the smile card, which is like, it's not planned that nobody's going to get it. We want everyone to get it, but at least they'll see it on the lockers and they can read positive messages.
Yeah.
That's terrific. Well, thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Quentin. We really appreciate the update.
Thank you guys so much.
And have a great Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Thank you as well.
Okay. So we're going to move on to approval of minutes for the open meeting of September 24th, 2020. We have a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from September 24th.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion, corrections, concerns about these minutes? Okay, seeing none, this is a roll call vote. Jason?
Jason Greenwood, aye.
James?
James O'Brien, aye.
Jen?
Jennifer Pratt, aye.
Stephanie?
Stephanie Clarity, aye.
And Andy Cottarelli, aye. It's unanimous approval. Thank you very much. And next we're going to move on to item 5, communications, updated DESE quarantine guidance.
Okay, so this is actually a communication that just came out today, but it's very relevant, so I wanted to share it with the committee and with the community. So last night, the Department of Public Health in Massachusetts actually issued new guidance in terms of the requirements for quarantine. DESE has ratified that guidance today and put it out to all school superintendents today, saying that this is their new recommended guidance in terms of quarantining. So as I said, this is pertinent to everybody in the community, so I wanted to share with the committee this evening and the community this evening. So I'll just read through and then we'll talk about it a little bit. How long must you quarantine if you're identified as a close contact? You need to remain quarantined for at least 14 days from the date of your last exposure to the positive person, which was the old guidance. And then here's the new part, is the new part's after or at least 10 days, provided that all of the following are satisfied. Number 1, you have not had and do not have any symptoms. Number 2, you're tested on day 8, and we had to call the commissioner. It could be after day 8 as well, but you can't test earlier than the 8th day of your quarantine period or later, using a molecular diagnostic test, a PCR test, to detect the presence of the virus. Number 3, if you receive a negative test result. And number 4, if you monitor yourself for symptoms for the full 14 days, you can return after you have the negative test. So in essence, how the quarantine will change a little bit, instead of just being an automatic 14-day quarantine, it becomes, it's an automatic 10-day quarantine for a close contact. But then if you have a positive test, a negative test on day 8 or later of your quarantine, after you receive that negative test result, you can return to work or school. So this is, now there's some practicality in this. The PCR test is not a rapid test. That's a test that usually takes a couple days to get back. So even if you had that test on day 8 or 9, and you had to wait 2 or 3 days to get it, you still may not be able to return to day 12 or 13 to get your negative result. But it may allow some people to return from quarantine a couple days earlier. So that, as I said, this is guidance that came out by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health last evening for all citizens in the state of Massachusetts as the quarantining protocol. And DESE endorsed that guidance today and put it out to superintendents.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions on that or concerns on that updated guidance from DESE in the state? I can't see everybody. Hold on.
Doesn't look that way.
Okay, I don't see anybody. All right. Well, thank you for the update, Scott. I'm sure the committee and the community appreciates that. Will that be reflected on our website on the?
Yeah, yes, that will be posted on the website.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
It may actually already be posted up there, but if it's not, it definitely will be.
All right, so we'll move on to item 6, reports from the superintendent. Item A, personnel updates.
Okay, we've only had a couple of personnel movements since our last meeting a couple weeks ago. 2 new hires, Holly Hoffman as an assistant cook at the middle high school for cafeteria services, and Skylar McNeil as an ESP in special education at the elementary school. That's all of our movements since our last meeting.
Okay, great, welcome to them. We'll move on to B.
Pathways program. So Meredith Erickson and Mike Schultz will give an update on the implementation of the Pathways program at the middle high school, including some of the courses we received, talk a little about the grant that we talked about last week. So let's kind of give us an update on where we've been going with Pathways. Just going to give me a second to invite Mike into the meeting as a panelist.
There he is.
And then I will open up the presentation and
Is it you?
it is me.
Thank you.
Hi, Meredith.
Hi, how are you? So I'm going to start off and then turn the time over to Mike, and we'll kind of volley back and forth if that's okay. But we're really excited to come to you tonight. A year ago, we presented in November and shared the kind of the communal vision and the incredible amount of work that was being done in planning the pathways. And we wanted to let you know, after the COVID closure and now that we're back in the hybrid model, just a status update on where we're at, but really to showcase some of the great things that are happening and to talk about next steps and some grant funding. So as an overview, when we came to you last year, we tentatively had planned on launching 4 pathways. If you remember the layout, which will actually appear on the next screen, there were 7 different pathways that we were looking at to try to help students have opportunities and electives that were related to career clusters and potential opportunities in both industry and college when they leave Carver Public Schools. So we proposed to launch these 4 pathways: biomedical, manufacturing, engineering, technology, computer science, and culinary hospitality management. So we have gone ahead and done that. And Mike is going to be showcasing some of those pieces. We'll also be talking about the grant. So Scott, if you can bounce to the next slide. Thank you. Our overarching aims for this first year are to build enrollment through these career exploration activities and then the academic programming related to these 4 different pathways, and then to continue to spend this year working on our expansion plans for next year. So if you remember when we first came to last year, we talked about that there would be freshman offerings, sophomore offerings, junior offerings, senior offerings, and it would scale up into a 4-year program. And even though we have a mix of different grades enrolled in this first year, the idea would be to have an articulated 4-year sequence. So we're continuing to work on that specifically in the different areas, but also looking at the feasibility of environmental and agriculture and whether we'll be able to continue on with that. And then to also seek grant funding and resources this year and continue to partner with regional industry and mass hire. So I'll talk about some of those pieces towards the end, but Mike is going to share a little bit about what classes we have launched this year, what our enrollment looks like over the span of the whole year. And as you know, we're in a block schedule. So in some cases, these courses are only offered in one of the semesters, just like the other classes. And this would indicate the enrollment for the whole year. And then he'll talk about some of the pictures and some of the activities that students are doing.
Thank you, Meredith.
Thank you, Meredith, and good evening, everyone.
Hi, Mike.
Before I get going into some of the details, I do want to do a couple of quick thank yous. Obviously, the work that we've done around this has been a team effort from administration, the teachers, department chairs. So I appreciate the work that we've done to get to this point. I also want to thank this committee and the town for sort of supporting our vision of the Pathways program. And I think you're going to see as we go through these slides tonight, one, the enrollment and the interest is really high, but you're going to see some of the cool things the students are doing and some of the equipment we got to support their learning. So I do want to thank collectively the staff and the community for supporting this concept. So biomedical and wellness, this is a sort of our vision of the Project Lead the Way biomedical program. And we sort of put our own little spin on it where we've incorporated the biomedical piece, which is the medical field, with wellness. The 2 big classes that come out of this as our intro classes are STEM Inquiry Lab. And you'll notice there are 30 kids in that class. There's an honors side of it and a college prep. They're in the same class together. And there is the health and wellness, which has 24 students. Basically, in terms of the STEM Inquiry Lab, the concept is claim, evidence, reasoning format. They're doing a lot of labs, as Mrs. Waitner had discussed earlier. And really their focus is looking at things scientifically, and they're taking kind of key concepts from a multitude of science classes students would have throughout their high school career, and they're exposing students to it now and introducing this concept to the students. So it's been it's a very cool class. It's co-taught between Mrs. Waitner and Mrs. Cornock. I did kind of showcase that a little bit when we talked about live streaming. Some of the technology in there that they have, we're going to show you. One of the things that has been really helpful in the science classes this year are the clear touch boards and the screens. We're using them not only to sort of communicate with the students through virtual learning, but there's a lot of cool programs that they're running on them. So again, the biomedical, I'm not going to read this for you, but there's a lot of labs. Some of the ones that they've really focused on so far is a serial dilution net lab, sample collection, and chromatography. And again, this is all inquiry-based, solving problems, looking at things analytically, and working through some of the concepts of the scientific process. This one here, we actually were showing this off today with Mrs. Pratt. But this is one of our clear touch boards that is on a pivot table. And this can either stand straight up or it can go down flat so that the students can gather around it and use it interactively. This is an app or a program that both the wellness classes and our STEM classes in AP Biology are using. And this is just a sample of the heart and the vessels on the skeletal. But you can expand it, you can turn it, you can pivot it, you can see many different angles of the human body. It's a really cool program. And they're using this in their labs to really get a good look at things they probably wouldn't see through YouTube or other videos. It's really interactive and really cool. Everything on the screen is touch. And as you look on the left side there, when they click on a certain thing, it gives you a summary of what it is and a breakdown of certain things. So next slide, Meredith. So the STEM class actually surveyed their students. We were walking around on Tuesday with Mrs. Clarity, and we were talking about the program. And when we left, I think one of the questions we asked was the students' interest in how they liked the class. And this is the result of the survey. Just in a quick summary, like 70% of the students have an interest in potentially pursuing or definitely pursuing a career in the medical field. So again, exposing students to a variety of careers in these fields is really the goal of our sort of entry-level course, the STEM class. This is our health and wellness class, and this course really is an intro into the wellness field. Within the field, there's personal training, there's a connection to the EMS programs in town. This is a quick snapshot of our renovated wellness center. There's a lot of new Nautilus equipment towards the back of the picture. We were able to acquire some of this from Sacred Heart when they were closing. And the benefit for us is that the work that they do in the wellness class, I mentioned earlier that Mrs. Robidoux and some of our, Mr. Fracalasi, they have a similar app, well, the same app that AP Bio uses, which was that skeletal muscle. They analyze the muscles, they look at the heart, they work through systems and really determine how exercise and movement affects the body. Then they go into the wellness room or the lab and they create their own programs and they analyze the work that they do. So this is our health and wellness one. Manufacturing, engineering, technology. This was Mr. Ruta's program. This has really high numbers. There is a very strong interest in this. And some of the things they're doing are CAD design, engineering, robotics, 3D printing. And again, this concept is in the engineering design process. So I'm going to show you a couple examples of how they're looking and using or demonstrating their understanding of the engineering design process. But the numbers are strong here. This is just a slide of, to the left is sort of a quick look at the lab. You go into this room and it's just, it looks like a working lab. There are boxes there are tools, there are piles of supplies. They're working on submersible robots right now. The 8th grade is going to be doing a rocket program after Thanksgiving. A lot of the things that you see here that they've created, like the nose cones for the rockets, they designed and printed on 3D printers. So they're really interacting and creating and building and then printing. One of the things I forgot to mention, and Mrs. Waitner will be upset if I don't mention this, but she is collaborating with the Mrs. Waitner and Mr. Reuter are collaborating, and his classes are 3D printing, I believe, a hand. And they're going to work with the anatomy program to get it so that the nerves of the hand can work with and Meredith, you can probably explain it better than I can, but basically they're creating the hand and they're going to wire it and get it ready, and the anatomy is going to put it together, and their labs are going to be being able to move the hand and demonstrate the muscles and the nerves that go with that. So a lot of collaboration between the programs right now. This is a good example of the engineering design process. The image on the left is the Clawbot robots that we purchased through some of the funding through the CTE money we received. The robot on the left is the robot that students built based on the specifications from the kit when they get it. The robot on the left is a modification to the initial robot. So what you see here in the second picture is our Vex Arena, and the students they use their robots, and the first time through, they use the traditional robot that was built. They have 2 minutes, and the object is to get obviously more objects on the other person's side. You can either slide them through the slots or you can put them over the top. Students did that. They were required to then go back into the lab and say, what modifications can I make to my robot to improve the efficiency? So this today was a competition with the modifications. These two students were competing. This is a picture of.
Sorry about that. Nope, sorry about
That's fine. Yep, that's fine. The next one is a picture of our 3D printers, and the image on the right is another example of students looking at a problem and seeing how to solve it. So those 3 objects on the 3D printer are actually their mask. I think he calls them mask holders or mask straps. And the students were saying that the loops on the masks irritated their ears. So they were tasked with the challenge of figuring out a way to attach the mask without looping the ears. And these are 3 modifications. I think the middle one was the one that won, but they determined that it might be too big and they had to shrink it down a little bit. So again, looking at issues and solving problems and working through it together as a group. Computer science is going to actually start up second semester. This is our Project Lead the Way program. It's the grant that we received, and Mrs. Young has been through the training. She has 21 students. The bootstrap and reactive classes are sort of our entry level, but we have 20 students signed up second semester to take the Project Lead the Way Computer Science Essentials. I want to mention one thing on the bottom, sorry. We also, this year, with the help of Mr. Cartmill and Mr. Arruda, we have registered and we have an active esports team. Esports is actually becoming a fairly big high school activity. We compete against other schools in the state, and there is a state championship in the program. And we have established a team. We've got great numbers, and we won our first match, I think, last week against Tingsboro High School, I believe. So it's a program the kids are very excited about. So Project Lead the Way, this is just, again, we haven't had this class. One of the things about that I think is exciting is the classes that we are currently running. The staff is constantly meeting and revising. So this is our first go of it. Engineering classes are already looking at revising and adapting. I know that Meredith's going to talk a little bit about this in a few minutes, but we have made some partnerships with local organizations, manufacturing technology organizations and companies, and they're providing us with skills that they really want our students to have. And as we know these things, we modify and adapt our curriculum to support that. Same is true with the environment. The biomedical pathway and the STEM classes. And talking with Stacy and Tiffany and Mrs. Littleton, they're already looking at the labs they're doing, how they modify them and continue to enhance them. So the project Lead the Way, Unit 1 is creative computing and building with blocks. This is just a brief summary there. And the second unit will focus on computing and society and transitions to the text. Again, this is the Project Lead the Way program, which, you know, we will be following their guidelines and their recommendations as we build that curriculum out. The culinary hospitality management is really one of the pathways that probably is our most established. What's really different this year is we've actually purchased the ProStart curriculum, and you can see our numbers have always been very good in the culinary program. Our intro class is 45, which is a huge number for us. The international foods is 27, and then our ProStart 1 has 10 students. So that's really, the ProStart 1 is our first entry-level CTE program, and we will build on to ProStart 2.
Mike, can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
Can you explain ProStart just in a little more detail? What is it exactly?
So the ProStart is a nationally accredited culinary program, and we have participated in it through the competition side of things. So when we competed in the management and the culinary side of the ProStart, so I think we're 3-time state champions with Mr. Portalance. Mr. Portalance brought it in at the time for a select group of students that really wanted to focus on the culinary end of things. So it was more of an after-school program. We're now bringing that into the curriculum, and they're going to be part of this ProStart program. There is a ProStart curriculum that we're following, and when the students graduate through the ProStart 1 and ProStart 2, they'll get the accreditation on their diplomas.
Well, that's great. So it was tested out with the chef already. That's great. So we're bringing it into the mainstream.
Yep, absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
And this is just a summary of the hospitality. This is actually a summary from Chef. And again, our overall vision of this program, and we've started to sort of do this, is the block schedule has helped us out a lot in terms of students being able to spend a prolonged amount of time preparing meals and supporting. What we really want to do over time is a cafe where we're producing meals and food for the community. So in our old schedule, it just didn't allot enough time for that group to really focus on cooking over time. And in talking to Chef, he feels as though the block schedule allows us to keep the kids in a little longer. They can help prepare meals. Right now, the way he has set it up is twice a week he is preparing meals or offering meals for staff. Right now we're going to be doing it as an afternoon thing, so staff can take meals home. But the student, in the past, the chef would have the students prepare some stuff, but he did a lot of the cooking and support work because of the time. So, for example, one class would come in and prep, the next class would cook, and so forth. Now with the extended period, these students are able to go through the entire process. So that's been a huge help. And I think that's it. One last thing about, and it's not on here, but as we look at next year and planning, the next 2 pathways that we're looking to move forward and we're planning is environmental. And we're going to be doing some experimental stuff in the spring around environmental, getting a feel for how many students have an interest through some classes we're going to be offering. And then obviously our performing arts. That is something we currently do in the building, but really strengthening that and reorganizing that so it's more focused into a pathway for students. So those are the 2 that we're really planning right now.
Great. Meredith, did you have more, did you say?
I do, yeah. I'm actually going to be talking about the innovation planning grant. So to move forward, Mike did a great job of highlighting the way that we built this out during the first year and the heavy lifting that's been done by our incredible faculty to make this vision come alive. With that said, the state has incentivized programs like ours by putting a specific funding path in place, but there are a lot of hoops to jump through and a lot of commitments that we make. And one of the channels by which we felt there was alignment is something called the Innovation Pathways. And it's a structure within Massachusetts high school that allows you to pick an industry sector. So it's broadly defined. So manufacturing or environmental or hospitality, so on and so forth. And the state determines what those are. And then from there, they ask schools to have some flexibility in developing really strong technical programs. And they ask you to partner with employers and industry in the area. They do that. Whoops, I can't move forward. Thank you. They do that by asking us to connect with our local regional workforce development boards. So I've been working with Mass Hire, and they helped me to basically look for areas in the region where there were some deficits in terms of a workforce and some areas where employers were asking for support. So with that, we felt like manufacturing would be a good entree into this innovation program. So we had to go through, write a planning grant, which we received for about $28,000. And then from that planning grant, we can use that money this year largely for equipment, but also for curriculum development and for working with industries to come up with what our curriculum will look like. So Dave Aruda, as Mike mentioned earlier, he is our new manufacturing engineering technology teacher, and he and I meet often, and he has joined me on some of these connections with regional employers, and we're starting to develop relationships with them. A few weeks ago, I had to turn in something called the Part A grant. It was many, many, many pages, but what it did is it really provided us the opportunity to look at where we're going to go with manufacturing engineering technology and to make sure that we have all hands on deck. And then if the state likes our application and feels like we're compliant in meeting the 5 guiding principles, then we will be sure, or hopefully we'll be invited into something called Part B. And then next year we would be able to be an innovation pathway school. What does that mean? So I want to talk a little bit about that in the next slide. The guiding principles that we agree to have a whole series of different commitments underneath them, but the 5 broad topics are: we want to make sure that these pathways are available to all students, not just for students that may be college bound or career bound, but really a nice mix of both because of the research that supports that and the fact that it would give a more enriching experience for our students. We want to make sure that there are guided academic pathways, so we commit to having 2 college level courses available when a student commits to a pathway, or in addition to 2 technical courses. We also have to commit to advanced student support. So for students that may struggle with perhaps a math class or a technical science class, we agree to provide support to them and really meet the learner where they're at in an effort to make sure that we're equitable. There's a clear focus from the DESE to look at representation and make sure that these pathways are available to kind of the vulnerable populations, so students with special ed or free and reduced lunch or English language learners, and making sure that these programs are open to them. And then the biggest pieces that we're working on right now are connection to career and effective partnerships. There is a component to this that requires when students are in an innovation pathway, their senior year, they will be placed in an internship. So in some ways that was low-hanging fruit for us as we have a senior internship program. The state has a model internship plan that our career counselor actually helped participate in the development of. And so we're in the process right now of kind of looking at our internship program and how to make sure that we're meeting those guidelines, and then to make sure that students are being placed in careers related, or in internships, related to manufacturing, engineering, and technology. On the next slide, I think I spoke most about this just a minute ago. We are in the process of getting more equipment, and then on the slide after this, Scott, thank you. We also have agreed to commit to something called the MyCap plan. So our guidance department, right before COVID, went to their first MyCap training, and it is a program that the state has us commit to. It aligns with Naviance, which is our guidance program. But the idea is that students have a 4-year plan and some post-secondary counseling that will allow them to choose from career or college. And one of the nice pieces that we hear from schools that have already been designated as innovation pathways is that there are some students who participate that never thought that they would go to college, and through this pathway all of a sudden that's an opportunity for them. Likewise, there are students that were very college bound but said, you know, I was really good at taking tests, I was really good at the textbook piece and getting those good grades, but the innovation pathways has given me a lot of hands-on experience in class, and then the internship has provided some on-the-job relevance or applicability to what it is that we learned freshman, sophomore, junior year. So it's really this nice symbiosis in terms of that expectation. As we mentioned, the grant itself is focused on manufacturing, engineering, technology, but there is some money to work on the curriculum development, excuse me, for environmental and agriculture. In terms of our long-term work, we will be developing a steering committee. We talked a little bit about this last year, that would have a cross-section of industry, teachers. We'd like to have a student representative or two from manufacturing, engineering, technology to participate. Even though we offer the college level courses through AP and through Project Lead the Way, or we're in the process of launching that now, there's also a desire to continue to look for partners at the college level, and then to continue to develop our exploratory events. So before I entertain questions, the one other thing that I'll mention is that the innovation pathways will open up the door for other grant opportunities. There's also, when you're designated, there's also a component where the state tracks which students are involved in your pathway, and they add that to the Chapter 70 formula. So there's a little bit of incentive from the state, financial incentive, to make these relevant learning opportunities for students. Another grant that we just received, which is designated for our school through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, is called Connecting Activities. And that's an after-school program that we'll be launching, where students can participate in a club where they have virtual field trips, where they make connections with people in industry, and then they learn things after school related to kind of job preparation relevant to that career cluster. And there's a deliverable at the end. So it might be like a mock job interview and resume. It may be developing like a brochure for graphic design, or something like that. So that is the extent of our update tonight. And both Mike and I are willing to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Meredith and Mike. I have a quick question before you open it up. Meredith, who has been writing the grant applications for this? Was it you?
It's been a team effort.
A team effort. Oh, good. Well, that's good.
Mostly Meredith. Meredith is taking the lead on writing the grants. She doesn't want to take it's great. I shouldn't say take responsibility for it.
She's being humble.
Meredith has been the lead, yes, on the grant writing. Obviously with support from teachers, department chairs, Mr. Schultz. So definitely there's a lot of support in place, but Meredith's taking the lead on the grant writing.
Well, I just want to point that out. I thought that was the case. I want to thank you, Meredith and Mike, and everybody that's involved. I'm sure the community and the committee understand that whenever we do have a successful grant application written by one of our staff members, that's money that it saves you in your annual tax bill. So, and it allows us to do things like this and offer programs to our students that we might not be able to. So that being said, would anybody Does anybody have any questions or comments for Mike or Meredith? Let me look down the line here.
I think Stephanie raised her hand.
Stephanie, okay, Stephanie.
Yeah,
I didn't see it. Sorry.
No, that's fine. It was literally 2 seconds ago. So I was able to see some of, the new offerings in STEM and action. And it was really awesome to see. It was great to see how engaged the students were and how excited the staff was and the amazing technology that they have. And then on the engineering and robotics side, it made me want to enroll in some of these courses. And, I'm 48, so it's been a while since I've been in high school, but it was certainly really great to see. So I just want to say thank you to everyone involved. I really hope that people in the community realize how unique to Carver for us, a community of our size, to be able to have these types of programs and to have these opportunities. I think it's really fantastic that these kids can get exposed to all these different things that they might otherwise never consider themselves to be a fit for. And by exploring these electives and these pathways, they may find something that they're passionate about, they never thought they could possibly be involved in. So I just think it's really great for them to have these opportunities. And thank you to Meredith and to Mike and to everyone involved in bringing these the pathways forward in here in Carver. So thank you so much, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Stephanie. Very well said.
You're welcome.
Anybody else on the committee like to have a comment?
Andy, it's Brad. For some reason, my video will not pop on. Scott, it says I'm locked out of video. But I just want to add on that I want to thank the community for this, because don't forget, the community originally gave us $100,000 for the CTE startup for the program. So we're going again to the town, anticipated for again $100,000 next year to keep these programs going. It takes a lot of upfront money. Definitely the grants help, but through the capital project committee and everything, we were able to get $100,000 last year. We're anticipating another $100,000 for FY22 to keep these programs and start building them. So thank you for everyone for that.
Thank you, Brad. Good points.
And I was just going to add in, I think it was a year and a half ago, or maybe even 2 years ago, that Mike Cam made an original presentation about the concept of pathways. And so a lot of planning has gone into this, and this has really been Mike's vision that he's brought to the middle high school as the principal. And we're really excited about seeing these courses be launched. So this year is the start. It's been about a year and a half of implementation, and a lot of time, a lot of effort, as people have mentioned. And we really wanted to highlight for the community that these programs have started. That's kind of, I kind of went back to this slide in the beginning of, our goal over time is to build out all of these pathways. So right now we've started with the biomedical wellness and the manufacturing engineering and the computer science and the culinary and hospitality management. But our goal is to build this all out. And these are going to be tremendous opportunities available for our students in Carver who enter the middle high school for the years to come. Just, I guess I wanted to highlight that one more time. But that's my takeaway from this presentation, is that we've begun to build out these pathways, and it's going to continue to grow, and it's going to provide some great opportunities for the students of Carver.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, opportunities and they can have in their own school, without having to go out of town. Mike, I have one question. Oh, James, go ahead. James O'Brien.
So I would also like to thank you guys, because it's been nice to see this grow since it's began, and since it was just a pluck of an idea a while ago. And I think adaptation is the route to survival, and education is changing. And I think this is a great show that Carver's at least working its way to try and figure out how to change with that, and how to work towards the right direction to address what we need for the future that's coming, as opposed to what it was in the past. And I think this is a great start for that. And I love seeing the progress in it, and can't wait to see it keep growing as it goes through. So thank you all for your efforts in this, community, staff, everybody involved in making this happen. This is a fantastic starting point, and it's great that the progress is so visual from it so far. So thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Mike, I have a quick question for you. This is a long-term question. This is going to be determining what I do next Halloween. You told us about the 3D printed hand with the active nerves. That's
Yes.
correct, right? Is this something we're gonna have to be following through the town? Like the villages are gonna have to be with the pitchforks and the torches, following this thing, you know, when it escapes?
No, I think it'll be, I'll leave that to Mrs. Wade there, but the technical part of that. But a really cool concept of the
Yeah.
two groups coming together. I'm excited to see how that works.
That was really neat when you mentioned that. I'd love to see that live when that becomes more of a reality.
You know what's really exciting with the programs and the teachers is that, you know, they're learning some of this stuff with the students, and they're not afraid to take risks, and they're trying new ideas. And I don't know. I just the concepts and the ideas that they come up with are really cool.
Well, thank you very much, Mike and Meredith, for that presentation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, map assessment data.
Meredith, excuse me 1 second. Not that I'm sure Mike wants to stay as a panelist, but I'm going to disinvite him as a panelist.
Okay.
Sorry about that. And Brad, you should be, I fixed it, Brad, you should be able to turn your screen on. Not that you want to, but you certainly can when you need to. And we'll go to Meredith for the map assessment.
Thank you. So I'm going to shift roles here for a second, or shift areas of focus, and talk about an assessment that we are piloting, or are in the middle of piloting this fall. So I wanted to let the committee know about the MAP assessment. And if you're a parent of students in grades 1 through 8, you are aware of this because we asked parents to make sure that students brought Chromebooks in. And if students were at home as part of our remote program, we made an attempt to have those students be assessed as well if internet connectivity was good. So I wanted to let the committee know a little bit about what this assessment is and then why we're piloting it. So the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education reached out to superintendents, and I think Scott mentioned this as he was writing his student learning goal. They asked us to gather some data on where students were coming back from the school closure, and basically to look at if there was a lot of academic loss, and then to be able to plan accordingly for that. This test provides a baseline for assessing that information, as well as looking at the model that we're in. Obviously right now we're in a hybrid model. And then in non-COVID times, this assessment helps teachers determine students' relative areas of strength and weakness. In this model, we're looking at that regression, but we also can get information about where students need to focus and where they're already achieving. With that said, it's a very different type of assessment. So it is given on the computer, but unlike MCAS, it is not designed to measure grade level standards. What it's really meant to do is look at each individual student and figure out where they are and where they are ready to learn. And by design, when students hop onto this assessment, it is intended for everyone to get half of the questions right and half of the questions wrong, which obviously feels a little bit different than your typical test at school. So this assessment is not really a test as much as it is a diagnostic. It allows us to kind of go through and calibrate and pinpoint. It is a very largely used assessment throughout the country. About 5.5 million students participate in this. And it is intended, as you take a question and you get it right, it's intended to give you one that's a little bit harder. If you get that right, you bump up to another one that's a little bit harder. If you get it wrong, you bump down. If you get the next one wrong, you bump down. And the algorithm that the assessment uses continually adjusts and calibrates in order to make sure that students are getting questions that are appropriately challenging or just a little bit above challenging if they can't answer it, and then it drops it down below. And as it does this, it narrows and collects information on different aspects of how a student is in regards to math or in regards to reading. So we call that a computer adaptive format. That's different than MCAS. MCAS takes questions and they say, these are fifth grade questions, we're going to give them to fifth graders. These are eighth grade questions, we're going to give them to eighth graders. And then if students do well because they are at that grade level or above that grade level, then it works accordingly. If not, there's no dipping down to help really kind of diagnose where a student might need support. So that's why we feel that this computer adaptive assessment can be so powerful. It also provides, for every student that took the reading test, it provides a Lexile range, and we haven't had that measure in our district before, and it's something that teachers will be hearing more about. We're still in the process of wrapping up the assessment, so we have lots of training that we have yet to do, but the Lexile range is the most widely used measurement of both readability and reading ability. So the distinction there, and it sounds nuanced, is that text has a readability. And we know that, there's a difference between reading maybe a Dr. Seuss book in the New York Times based on the sentence complexity and the strength of the vocabulary. There's a difference in how you would access that. And so this test provides a range of what a reader's ability is, each student's ability, and that way they can access reading material that's appropriate for them and allows them to grow, but is not so far reaching that they won't comprehend it, and not too low that they don't grow from it. So another benefit. The other thing about this assessment is that unlike MCAS, we get the results right away. There's usually a 24-hour period between when the student finishes the test and when a teacher can access those reports. It also allows for consistent longitudinal data over time. In terms of the results are easy to understand because they are consistent intervals. If you think about bringing your children to their annual well child check, they usually have, a kiddo pop on the scale, and then they measure them and they show the growth chart over time for height and weight. And this would be very similar to that. The intervals are all the same, whether you're a first grader or an eighth grader, so you can actually see growth over time. And you'll see that in just a second with some initial data that we've collected. The other thing is the reports can be broken down to the student level, the class level, and that way teachers can work together in groups to be able to analyze that data. We're not there yet, but as we use this and as we pilot this, if we choose to adopt it, after several benchmarks, they do provide instructional goals and some opportunities for that. Teachers can start to preview those now, but the idea would be that we would build that out over time. And then lastly, there are a robust suite of reports that are going to require time and training, but we're going to launch that on December 2nd. We have a half day and teachers will be working together. And just a reminder that effective assessment will provide information to steer student growth. I know the MCAS is powerful for many reasons, but one of the challenges we struggle with is when we get the data back, usually the students have moved on to the next grade level, and it can oftentimes be clunky and cumbersome to try to wade through that and figure out how to make changes that support students. So we did our pilot. We have very few students left to test. So I was able to pull data today from the majority of students. And I wanted to just give a quick preview just because I found this fascinating data. The red column here lists where our Carver students on average are at by grade level. So first grade, second grade, third grade, up through eighth grade. The orange bar is the national mean based on 2019 fall testing. So it's looking specifically at fall. And if you notice, last year, we were not in COVID in 2019 nationally. And this year, we obviously are in hybrid. So for math, with rare exception, we are at or above the national norm. So I know that it's been concerning for parents, myself included, because my children in their district are also in a hybrid model. But this data shows that there has been less regression and less loss than we may have thought. And we're excited about what this means. what's even more interesting is with reading, there is a wider spread between Carver and the national average or the national mean. And you can see in grades 1 through 8 that we're above in all of these areas. You know, there are lots of different hypotheses as to why this could be. One of the pieces may be that when we closed in March, that it may have been easier for students that were already reading or reading at grade level to be able to continue to grow and read during the closure and throughout the summer, whereas math may require, you know, more face-to-face training and more face-to-face teaching. But it's interesting, we noticed that slight gap between math and reading, but in either case, we're well situated compared to the national mean. So in conclusion, our next steps are to work with teachers to start looking at these results. It is a pilot, so it's meant to just be an activity that allows teachers to start to use this and to think about how they could envision using this data to support their students, and then to administer the spring benchmark. Typically, we would do this 3 times a year, but we found with COVID and with the hybrid model that the testing took a little bit longer, and we also wanted to start a little bit later given the fact that we had fewer in-person days prior to that. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Meredith. Would anybody on the committee like to make a comment or have a question for Meredith on the MAP assessment? Jason.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. I have a couple questions.
I hope I can answer them.
Do we still do iReady in the district?
No.
Okay, then that will save half the questions that I had to ask.
Okay.
The second thing is, so on those scaled scores you just showed,
Yeah.
like if a kid, say a second grader got a score of 210 and a fifth grader got a score of 210, do those mean something different, or are the scores like mean the same thing across the grade level, or does a 210 in grade 3 mean something than a 210 in grade 8, for instance?
That's an awesome question, and I appreciate you asking that. So a 210 is a 210 is a 210, and the only thing I can liken it to is actually kind of a negative metaphor. Right. But when I step on the scale in the morning, right, and I realize that it's heavier or lighter than it was the day before, I'm benefiting from the fact that the scale is reporting, I say benefiting, not really, but anyway, that the scale is reporting out a consistent interval, right? So it tells me, you know, your X number of pounds or whatever. And this would be the same scenario. So the algorithm, the computer adaptive aspect doesn't look at the grade level of the student. It just gives that score. It does break it down into domains and subdomains. So you can really kind of drill down and look at students' relative strengths.
So, I mean, it's doing what an iReady diagnostic did, literally the exact same thing.
Yeah.
But it's just now there's just no platform for that instruction. Like, I mean, I like this. I really like it a lot. But it's not as easy to implement. You know, there's no my path. There's no anything like that would kind of automatically be able to use this automatically. But I like it. I like it a lot. So.
Yeah, they do have integration partners. So NWEA, if you want to pay the cost, will connect with a variety of other partners that offer some curriculum-based components to this, and we'll take this data. But initially, this particular organization is a nonprofit, and it wasn't intended to be a curriculum resource. It was intended to be a map or a roadmap for each individual student on their strength and weakness. iReady is computer adaptive, but I think their aim was to provide some instructional support.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, that's fine. Because when I was hearing this, that was the immediate comparisons that I was making.
Yes.
And then I was hoping that there was a part of me that was hoping you were saying no about the iReady because it's redundant, right? Because they would have to do the diagnostic, which is the same thing, plus this, which is just like, that's bananas, but that's great. Right. So, all right, thank you very much. I appreciate this. I'm excited to see what happens in the spring when we get these comparisons.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have a comment or Meredith on this? Look down the line here. Okay, seeing none. Okay. Thank you, Meredith. We
Thanks, Meredith.
appreciate your presentation on that update. All right, moving on to item C, biweekly metrics. And on this item, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 different items, one topic. On each one, I'd like to stop after Scott makes his presentation on that and just stop for questions or comments so we can break it up a little bit if anybody has any questions.
Very good. All right, so I think as everyone is
With
kind of aware,
weekly metrics.
sorry about that, I was getting some background noise. So as I think as everybody is aware, a couple weeks ago, it was actually the day after our last meeting, the governor came out with revised metrics in terms of the gray, green, yellow, and red. So I want to start by showing that definition before we start looking at that metrics as a comparison when we look at cases. So the purpose of the new metrics, it was really to, one, differentiate between larger and smaller communities. The concern with the old system of metrics was that a small community could have 1 or 2 cases and end up being, or a few cases, 5, 6 end up being red. So they felt like it didn't distinguish enough between smaller communities and larger communities. The other thing is also took in some other factors because it's now looking at positivity rate, where the old metrics did not specifically identify positivity rate into the factors of what color you were in. And so based on that, Carver falls in the population range between 10,000 and 50,000. And I think this is actually this is a clearer definition of how you receive your color. I know there's varying opinions out there about this change and why this change happened. But ultimately, I actually think this is clearer in terms of understanding how you receive a color. So Carver is between 10,000 and 50,000 residents. So if we had less than or equal to 10 total cases, we would be gray. If we have less than 10 average cases per 100,000 and greater than 10 total cases, we'd be green. If we had greater than 10 average cases per 100,000 or greater than 5% positivity, we'd be yellow. And to be red, you have to have more than 10 cases per 100,000 and a positivity rate above 5%. And so we've been tracking all these communities and while tracking the trajectory of the spread of the virus. And what I did is I put in a hard line to make a distinction between the old metrics and the new metrics. Technically, the data was identified as November 4th for the date, but it actually didn't come out until Friday, November 6th. So last time we were together, we were just looking at the data from October 29th. So there's actually been 3 weeks of data since we last met for us to review. And the hard line, all the data is now under the new metric. So within Carver, obviously some things to point out is our case count has obviously risen. So for this week, the 19th, the day that was released today at 5 o'clock, Carver has an active case count of 24 cases within the community. We had that same active case count last week of 24, which is obviously double that of what our highest number of active case count was back on October 22nd of 22. And then if you also look at our overall cases, 132, some of these 24, because it's over a 2-week period, overlap. But if you look at it, if you take the one number of 24 over this time, that would be a fair, out of 132 cases total, in essence, in the last couple of weeks, Carver's had 20% of the total cases it's had throughout the whole pandemic since March. So things are clearly on the rise within the Carver community. The first week of the old system, the first week of the new system, we were green because we had more than 10 cases, 11, but our average daily incident rate per 100,000 was below 10. So we were a green community. The last 2 weeks, we've been a yellow community because obviously our total case count is over 10 and our average daily incidence per 100,000 has been 14. So that made us a yellow community under the current system. The other thing you want to point out here to look at in terms of the trend in Carver obviously our positivity rate has been much higher. So the last 2 weeks, our positivity rate has been 4.04% and 4.08%. In comparison, throughout the rest of the time that we've been tracking this data, we've been below 2%. So it's clear looking at this that within the Carver community over the last couple of weeks, really our cases have certainly risen and are certainly on the rise currently. And you'll see a similar thing when you look at each of the communities in our surrounding area. You'll see a similar trend. Except for Kingston, because Kingston had that little spike here in October where they had 41 cases. But I believe the rest of the communities we're going to look at, they actually have right now is currently their highest active case count that they've had. Kingston's down a little bit from the 40 that they had in mid-October. Middleborough currently has 56 active cases, which is the highest that it's had throughout the time we've been tracking the data. They've been identified as a yellow community with 14.6 per 100,000, and also a higher percentage of positivity at 3.1%. Plimpton, even as a small community, Plimpton, as we tracked early on, had several weeks at 0, several weeks below 5. 6 obviously isn't a crazy amount higher, but it is their highest case count that they've had since we've been tracking the data, and also the highest percentage of positivity that the community's had since we've been tracking the data. Plymouth, the story is very similar. So Plymouth has 110 cases. They had 111 on October 14th. Their range of positivity has been actually fairly consistent over the last 5 or 6 weeks. And they went from a red community to a yellow community under the new metric, and that number of average daily incidents per 100,000 has been fairly consistent over the last 5 or 6 weeks for Plymouth. Rochester had 10 cases. That gets them gray because you have to have greater than 10. So they had 10, so they stay as a gray community even though they have the 12.6. So based on their size, the 10 cases keeps them gray. Also, they have, but that is their highest case count and the highest percentage of positivity. And same with Wareham. So Wareham's case count is 51. Their highest rate of positivity of 4.82. Wareham was very close to being a red community because if this had been a 5% positivity, Wareham would have been a red community this week when the data was released. So I think just a general review of this data shows that in the region, the case count's on the rise. There are more cases within each community. The percentage of positivity is on the rise. And obviously, particularly in Carver, the last 2 weeks has been double what we had had at any other time. And probably, as I said, represents over 20% of the total cases that Carver's had as a community since the beginning of the pandemic. So I guess I would take any questions on this data. Jason.
There was a time where I thought Desi said they were going to release this stuff on Friday. Did they backtrack and now, not Desi, the state rather, that this is only coming out on Fridays? Is it now coming out Thursdays consistently now?
Yes, so the first week they released it on Friday.
But that was just an anomaly, right?
That was an anomaly because they were changing the system.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
So then it came out on Thursday at 5 o'clock now. So on the 12th, it came out at 5 o'clock. The 19th, it came out at 5 o'clock. This was November 4th because originally they were doing Wednesdays.
Yeah, and then they pushed to Thursday. So
and then they first to Thursday, and then they didn't get that data out, and they actually released it on this day. It was supposed to come out on Wednesday. They said it was going to come out on Thursday. It ended up coming out on Friday. And the commentator's announcement changed the metric.
Right. I just wanted to make sure that it was Thursday consistently each time.
Now it's Thursday at 5 o'clock. Right, now it's Thursday at 5 o'clock, correct.
So when we're all recovering from Thanksgiving next week.
I don't know if it'll come out on Thanksgiving. We'll see.
All right.
We'll see. They haven't said anything about that yet. Any other questions on just the tracking of the data and the cases? I don't see any.
I had to unmute myself. Didn't realize it was on. Okay, so we'll move on to the DPH, the Department of Public Health report for 11/19.
Yeah. Which is this is really just the same data. We've taken and obviously we could look at more communities. because this is every community in Massachusetts and their color and their case count. The thing that's interesting is they've taken the map out. There's no map anymore. So you used to have the map of what every community was. That is no longer in this report. I haven't heard any reason as to why the map's out, but it's not there anymore. I don't know if it's in a separate report because they used to do it after all the towns, then you would see the map, but that's no longer in the report. I think there's a couple other things to look at here. So the maps they have kept in, they've kept the map in for, and I'm struggling to not lose my mouse here. Is testing, how much testing is being done within your community.
Testing rate?
Yeah, so they've kept that map. So Carver on this end is actually on a lighter color, a lower end in terms of the testing, and so is Southeast of Mass. Obviously, a lot of testing is happening in the Boston area and on the North Shore and just south of Boston, less testing happening down on the South Shore comparatively. And then percentage of positivity. So Carver is obviously a higher because we were at the almost between 3.88 and 5.24. So Carver had a higher rate of positivity, as did Wareham and some of the communities around us. They kept these two maps in. But the overall color map is no longer in here. And there's a lot of data in here. We haven't always looked at all the data in here. It's kind of been available to the committee so that it's there. But I did want to, just obviously cases by age for the last 2 weeks. So there's been a shift in who's testing positive. So the largest two groups that are testing positive at this time are your kids, 0 to 19 and 20 to 29. Those are the two largest groups. 30 to 39 outpaced a little bit. But obviously there's been a shift there from our older population testing positive to the younger population testing positive. But also with that shift has been hospitalizations. So there's still, hospitalizations have increased, but they have not increased at the rate that positive tests have increased. And the people who are being hospitalized are still your older population. So the two largest groups who have been hospitalized over 2 weeks are your 70 and 80-year-olds, not your 0 to 19, 20, 29, not your 0 to 40. So most of your cases are here, and most of your hospitalizations are still in the older population. So the rate of hospitalization has not climbed at the same rate of positive tests. But the rate of hospitalization has increased. There are more people in the hospital. Obviously, that makes sense because there's more people who are positive. And there are more, and there's more people in ICU, and there's more people who have been intubated over the last few weeks because cases are on a rise across Massachusetts, and as we've just seen in Southeastern Mass. But the increase in hospitalization, the increase in ICU beds, people in ICU, the increase in people who have intubated doesn't match the increase. It doesn't rise at the same rate as the increase in cases because it's still the older population that is ending up in those situations versus the younger population. So I thought that was data to point out in this report. So I think that's it from what we usually look at in this report. And we usually don't look at where the cases are, but I thought it'd be interesting to point those two pieces out and look a little bit at the comparison of where cases are and who's being hospitalized.
Scott, do you think the increase in testing positivity for the 0 through 19 due to DESE's guidelines of testing if your child starts showing symptoms?
Yeah, obviously, so right now kids are in school, not across all of the Commonwealth. There are still areas that are full remote. There's still a percentage of kids who are full remote, but obviously there's a lot of kids back in school. And the guidelines are, if you're not feeling well, you need to go and get tested.
Right.
And then, some of those students who may have been, well, obviously they're not asymptomatic because they're exhibiting symptoms. But maybe in a previous situation or maybe over the summer, they had fairly mild symptoms and the decision was not to test them, but now that they're in school and they're required to be tested, they're being tested.
Right. Does anybody have any comments or questions on this portion for Scott? Don't see anybody. Okay, let me check one more time. Nope. Okay. Okay, we'll move on to attendance tracking.
So we've been looking at attendance within the building. Went a little too far. So we'll just look at the last couple of weeks. Okay, so looking over the last couple of weeks, so obviously the community knew that we had both a positive staff member and a positive student last week. So that led to some increased quarantines. Some of those people, who are quarantined as close contacts, those close contacts were related to our positive staff member and or our positive student. Though interestingly enough, if you look at today, we no longer have an active positive student, but we do have 22 students that are in quarantine. And most of those are related to being close contacts to members of the community who've tested positive. Because obviously we've had an increase in the number of positive cases in the community, with 24 over each of the last 2 weeks active cases, 27 positive tests last week, 26 positive tests this week. So that obviously increases members of the community and their kids who might be quarantined as close contacts. So that number's on the rise a little bit because our case count is on the rise a little bit. But otherwise, our attendance has been pretty good. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later in my recommendations in my presentation in terms of staffing. The staff has been outstanding. People have been coming to work. But ultimately, it's also hard at this time to get substitutes because people aren't, it's not their first choice of something they want to do, is to come and substitute in a school building. So if you have 5 staff members out, and obviously in this case, the 5 were all at the middle high school because the positive teacher was at the middle high school and they all close contacts were all at the middle high school. So you have 5 staff members out in a building, plus other people following the protocols, because if you don't feel well in the morning, we're asking you to stay home and be tested. That we've been stretched thin a little bit on our ability to cover classes in the current model at times. And then that's obvious, that's a concern as we move forward in terms of staffing the buildings.
Okay.
And really just in terms of following what the protocols are.
Okay.
Any questions on? Yep.
Do you have anything from anyone on that section? Hold on. Jason.
Thanks. Scott, when a student is testing negative after testing positive, it just requires one test from them. Is there any, or even when it's the opposite way with testing positive versus negative, are there multiple tests that go into this? Or is it like they report, hey, I tested positive, then, hey, I reported negative, and that's it?
So no, if they test positive, they have to follow the protocol, which means they have to be out 10 days from their positive test.
Yep.
And then they have to have no symptoms for 24 hours. They're not required to test negative to re-enter into the building.
Okay.
Someone who tests negative, if they have symptomatics and they're sent home because they're not feeling well, or they stay home because they're not feeling well, and the nurse asks them to test, and they have a negative test, as long as they're not symptomatic for 24 hours, they can return to the building.
Can you scroll down on that real quick?
Yep. Just
so I'm clear. So, and for the tracking purposes here, I just want to see the date of that last number 1 on the student side.
Yeah.
So the 12th. So they found out they were positive on the 12th, or you found out they were positive on the 12th. So they automatically, wouldn't they not come off till the 22nd then?
No, because it goes back to when they became symptomatic.
Symptomatic, not.
Yes. So the 10 days reverts back to when, so they were symptomatic, tested, maybe they didn't get their test result for 4 days.
Got it. Okay. But it's automatic after 10 days that they're off that count.
As long as they've returned.
Right. Okay.
So if they're still symptomatic, and we haven't seen a lot of that in our cases we've had in the building, So we've had 4 positive students and 6 positive staff members. We did have one staff member who was symptomatic for close to 3 weeks, and they were out for an extended period of time, almost close to a month, because their symptoms lingered beyond. In general, obviously everybody's case is individual. Even some of our staff members who've tested positive have had mild symptoms for a short period of time, and then have been able to return within the 10 days.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Let me scroll down. Anyone else have anything on this? Seeing none. Okay, we'll move on to the COVID dashboard.
And this actually goes back to Tuesday, has similar data, but just the one that the public see, that we put out to the public on Tuesdays and Fridays, showing, and obviously the numbers from the attendance tracker are actually a little more accurate because they're as of today. But at the elementary school, we did not have any students with active COVID status. We had 4 students quarantined as of Tuesday, and we did not have any teachers with an active COVID status. As we just said, at the middle high school on Tuesday, we did have 1 student who was actively COVID positive, and we had 1 teacher who was one staff member who was an active case. And those numbers don't particular. So the 12 students quarantined don't all necessarily go back to the 1 student who tested positive. Some of those 12 students who are in quarantine could be from other positive cases in the community. And in this instance, I will say that the 4 employees who were quarantined were related back to the employee who had tested positive. So we had 4 employees who ended up being close contacts with that employee who were out. So with similar data, just put it a different way, and the one that the community sees, then that we update on Tuesdays and Fridays.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Does anybody have anything on the dashboard? All right, nothing there. All right, so we will move on to item D, discussion of transitioning models, grade K through 2.
Okay, I'm going to start with the end in mind. So I want to be very clear up front that my recommendation at this time is that we hold the course through the holiday season, and we do not set a date to transition students back in grades K1 and 2, and that we actually agree to revisit this discussion at our first meeting in January. And then, so I'll start with that in the end, and I'll kind of give a rationale for that recommendation to the committee. And then obviously the committee asked the administration to come back with a proposal for when we would transition students back into school. So the dates are there, and I'll talk about that a little bit too. So we're talking about if the committee does decide tonight to transition students back, we'd be looking to, our recommendation would be to transition students in grades 1 and 2 on January 11th, students in kindergarten on January 19th, and then we would maintain the half-day Wednesdays district-wide at this time. And our thought process on there is we'd probably we'd ask the committee to maintain the half-day Wednesdays until the entire district was back. But we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through the presentation. So as many people know, and as I actually referenced a few minutes ago while I was looking at the metrics, the governor on November 6th made a statement to the community of Massachusetts that resulted in some new DESE guidance. So that I wanted to share that guidance. Districts are expected to prioritize in-person learning across all color-coded categories unless there's a suspect of in-school transmission in accordance with DESE's guidance on responding to COVID-19 scenarios. Districts and schools and communities designated as green, gray, or yellow are expected to have students learning fully in person. And I've highlighted what many people are citing as a key criteria of if it's feasible, if the district feels it's feasible. And schools in red communities should implement hybrid models while maximizing in-person learning time for high-need students. Fully remote instructional models should be implemented only as a last resort. And there's a couple, obviously that sent a little bit of a stir to people saying that, the governor was in essence coming out and saying we need students as soon as possible return full in person. And then as more conversation happened on that, even in that press conference as the governor spoke and people asked some questions, he said ultimately it's still the local district's decision. So it is still charged to the school committee to look at what's happening on the ground, to look what's happening in your area, and to make the decision that you feel is the best for your community and the recommendation that's the best for your community. We had a call with the commissioner today. On that call with the commissioner today, he reiterated that line of reasoning and said that ultimately, he says that he knows that in many areas of Massachusetts, or several areas of Massachusetts, that there is a rise in cases, and that is concerning to many communities, and he understands that communities may stay where they are, and ultimately was saying that you have to make the best decision that you feel, is the best for your community. And the commissioner reiterated that today with superintendents. And really, he put a focus on not returning to remote models, and actually an emphasis of even districts that are in remote models should be transitioning to hybrid. That in-person learning should be happening across the Commonwealth, unless there's some real. They identified, actually in the press conference, the governor identified a couple of particular districts. So I think he referenced Chelsea. I can reference Chelsea because he referenced it. As a district where they had just a huge number of cases. There was real evidence of community spread, and said that DESE would work with that community in terms of staying remote and having a real push for making being remote. But one thing I want to point out here, and this isn't from the DESE guidance, the bold last bullet. Obviously there was a recommendation to move to more in-person learning without any change in the guidance. So the guidance hasn't changed, but there's a little bit of a push to have some more in-person learning. And superintendents across Massachusetts, including myself, had concerns about this new recommendation from the governor and from DESE. This is the response from the Massachusetts school superintendents to this new guidance. And they really focus on three things. And I've highlighted two, which are particularly an issue for us in Carver, and particularly number one. Convincing evidence that less than 6 feet of social distancing is safe. Ultimately, the DESE guidance is based on the concept of 3 feet of social distancing. And I don't know who else besides schools are being asked to use that standard right now. I think it's widely accepted in the community that the standard is 6 feet, but they're looking to schools to use 3 feet. And I've said this to a few people, and maybe there is, and there might be a parent out there that's going to hear me say this and say, well, that happens in my workplace. But I'm not aware of a workplace where we're asking 20 people to go into a room the size of a classroom and be there in a room that size with 20 people for an hour a day at the high school, an hour and a half a day at the high school, and then have a whole new group of 20 people come into that same room and stay with them for an hour and a half in the same room. Or at the elementary school, have 20 people in a room the size of a classroom and stay there for 4 or 5 hours with that same group. Now, obviously, at the middle high school level, it's different groups, which is even in some ways more concerning because you're with that group for an hour, hour and a half, and then you have a whole new group coming in. At the elementary school, you're with that group for a long period of time. And I don't know who else is being asked to meet that standard. And that's really the position of the Massachusetts school superintendents right now, is that at this time, especially with cases on the rise, that no one else is being asked to maintain that standard. And at this time, that's the position I'm taking, that's the position I'm supporting, is that we want to stay with the 6 feet of social distancing based on where we are at this time. We've said from the beginning we were going to look at the metrics, we were going to look at the cases, we were going to look at the transmission, and certainly things aren't improving. The evidence is clear that it's trending in the opposite direction at this time, and we as a community have to be cognizant of that. We have to be thoughtful about that. And kind of goes to my next slide. A key factor for me in this, and the key factor for my recommendation, is what we're currently doing is working from a health and safety perspective. The hybrid model, though, I understand people's concerns about it from an educational standpoint, and I've said from the beginning, in-person education is the best model of education in terms of learning. but from a health and safety perspective, what we're doing now is working. We're reducing close contacts. We're maintaining 6 feet of social distancing. And people can use this as an argument for why we should be coming back to school, because there's no evidence of community spread, which there isn't. So we've had 10 positive cases. And at this time, none of those 10 cases, they've all been individual cases, and there's no evidence that it's led to community spread or other people. You know, our other close contacts are being tested and they're not testing positive. It's because we are following the guidelines. We're maintaining 6 feet of social distancing. People are wearing their masks. People are washing their hands. People are staying home when they're sick. And we're implementing a system at this time that is working. And I don't know if we change to a full in-person model, if we adopt 3 feet of social distancing, I'm not going to tell you that's not going to work. It might work. It may very well. But I know this is going to work. I know maintaining the 6 feet of social distancing is working. And I don't know, based on where we are at this time, that I want to recommend taking that risk of going to the 3 feet at any level, kindergarten to 12th grade. So, you know, the only other thing I want to hit that's on the slide is the kids are learning. Learning is taking place. So, and again, it may not look exactly the way we want it. It may not be exactly the optimum. And I'm saying it's not the optimum. I'm not making the argument that it is the optimum. But it all goes back to that balancing test. We're balancing what is the optimal way to learn, what's the optimal educational opportunities for all of our students, and what's the best for the health and safety of the community. And the community means the students, the teachers, the staff, and the community as a whole. And we have to balance those two things out. And obviously, from my recommendation tonight, I believe that balance still falls with maintaining the hybrid model and putting health and safety first. If I have to default, if I have to take a risk, at this time my risk is going to be, well, I guess it's not a risk, is to stay with what is working in terms of the health and safety perspective, because I see evidences of students learning. I visit classrooms and see great education going on. I'm almost reticent to say this because I don't want to say that live streaming is the best either, because live streaming has some downfalls, but we have some teachers who are doing great things with live streaming. We have some teachers who are doing great things through the hybrid coaches at the elementary school. There's a lot of great things going on. Kids are learning, and we have to balance these two things out. And right now, I want to maintain the balance and support the health and safety of our staff and of our students. Other factors. I'm a little bit concerned that if a decision is made tonight, if the recommendation is, and the committee decides to move forward with transitioning on January 11th and January 19th, that we are going to have an increased number of students transition to remote. Even in our current situation, we're losing a couple of kids to remote each week. And I will tell you, those parents are saying the reason why they're going to remote is because of the virus. That's the rationale. They're not saying that they're frustrated with the hybrid model. They're not saying that it's not working for them. They're saying they're just concerned about the current state of the virus in the community. And when they say community, they mean Carver, but I think they also mean, you know, Massachusetts, southeast of Massachusetts. And I do think a decision to move towards an in-person model is going to see anywhere from 5 to 10 or maybe even more percent transition to full remote. And that has some implications for us as a district, which I'll talk about a little bit in a minute. Ultimately, you know, the other thing you have to remember is in many ways, and Karen Schoen, the nurse leader for the district, and I have talked to each other about this a lot since really July, since the guidance and the protocols that come out. The thing that makes the hardest thing for full in-person is just following the guidance and the protocols. It's going to lead to more close contacts. It's going to lead to more kids being out for, well, now they just changed the guidance to maybe 10 to 14 days as close contacts. It's going to lead to more staff being out as close contacts for 10 to 14 days, which is going to create staffing issues in terms of being able to make sure that we have teaching staff for all of our students who are in the building. It's going to limit use of classroom space. So a couple of teachers referenced that this evening. I think Ms. Waitner referenced that. And use of classroom space in a lot of different ways. It's going to limit the movement of students. There are students who benefit from movement breaks. And it might be more difficult to implement those movement breaks within a full in-person model. Lunch spacing is a concern. And obviously, the lunch spacing is something we can overcome. These are all things we can do them, or most of them we can do. If we go to a full in-person model, the kids are going to have lunch. We're going to figure it out. They're going to be all over the place having lunch, and we're going to figure out a way to do it. But it is a concern in terms of spacing. I know Ms. Waitner referenced labs at the middle high school. Right now, the science teachers have worked out some good policies and procedures, and we're using some screens and some different things that kids are actively participating in labs when they're in person. And then some of those are also participating in labs remotely when they're home. But when there's a real concern within the science department at the middle high school, and I know we're not making a recommendation to transition full in person at the middle high school, but we just wanted to throw that out there in terms of labs may become an issue at that building at that time. So there's just a lot of factors that impact our ability, impact the decision in terms of when the right time to transition full in person is. Now, if we do decide this evening to move to full in person on the January 11th, I want to talk a little about grade 1 and what that would look like in grade 2 in kindergarten. So we actually looked at these numbers at the last meeting. Ruby presented them to us. So just in current enrollment, 126 students in grade 1, one hybrid teacher. We have the cohort sizes. We have 5 in-person teachers, 1 remote teacher with a class size of 21. Projected if we go full in person, obviously we still have 126 kids. I've made a couple guesstimates here of how many kids would be remote. In the best case scenario, maybe we have 5 kids decide to go remote. In the best case scenario, no one would decide to go remote and everyone would stay in person. But if 5 kids, then we'd have 101 students in person. We could have 6 in-person teachers. We could have an average class size of 16 to 18, and we could probably keep our 1 remote teacher. But if we have more than 5 kids, because that makes that remote class 26, if all of a sudden we have 9 or 10 kids decide to go remote, which is a real possibility, then we have to have 2 remote teachers. That's why I have that 2 in parentheses next to it. The remote teacher's class size would drop, but we'd have to go down to 5 in person, which would drive that class size up a little bigger, 19, 20, 21. And so now that goes back to that whole concept of having 20 kids within a first grade classroom and the distancing problems that's going to incur. Because if we keep 2 remote teachers here, then we can only have 5 in-person teachers here. And then also we have to think about the impacts that has, and we've mentioned this before to the committee, that we make those transition, some students' teachers are going to change, some teachers' roles are going to change, and we've had communication with the teachers about that, who that would impact and how it would impact them, and we're prepared to do that. But the other thing we have to think about is we have to make sure we're moving into a model that's sustainable, because you'd hate to move in person, have it not be sustainable, have to take a step back, and then you're reshuffling again. And then maybe kids' teachers changing again. And that creates a lot of change and I think Eileen McPherson mentioned that in her comments about, there's some districts right now have been toggling back and forth between actually hybrid and remote. Some districts have been forced to go remote or chosen to go remote for short periods of time. And that creates a lot of transition for students. Grade 2 did a similar look. I won't read all the numbers to you. In grade 2, I think we're going to end up with 2 remote teachers. I don't think there's any way around it, because the remote class currently has 23. Unless there's very small amount of movement there. But what we've seen from our survey before, I remember we had the conversation maybe 3 or 4 meetings back when we were looking at some of the class sizes of the remote classes, and we talked about we didn't want to have remote classes of 25, 30 kids. I think there's a good chance that when we move to in-person and we survey parents and give parents that choice, whether they want to go remote or stay full in person, that we're going to end up with 2 remote teachers in second grade, 5 in-person teachers with a class size of 17 to 19. Kindergarten, I put kindergarten last because the administration's recommendation is we'd really like to look at, and this is part of the reason why for our recommendation for a time frame, if the committee was to go in that direction, would be to have kindergarten happen a couple weeks later on the 19th of January, because we actually want to look at the half-day model and go to the recommendation of the administration at the elementary school and of the kindergarten teachers who they've been working with and kind of developing this, would almost maintain the hybrid model, but have students come for 2.5 hours a day, 4 days a week. Go to the old school half-day kindergarten, and with a morning session and an afternoon session. And the rationale for this is that a lot of the concept of the full-day kindergarten is based on social interaction. And ultimately, if we're full in person with 18, 19 kids in a kindergarten classroom, the social interaction is going to be difficult trying to maintain all the social distancing protocols. You know, kindergarten is not the same. If you go into kindergarten right now, the kids are at little desks that are 6 feet apart. And they're actually managing it really well, because I don't know if they really know anything that different. Maybe in their preschool they did centers and tables. But, you know, kindergarten looks like a pretty old school traditional classroom right now. And the thought process would be to go full days, 4 days a week. That it would actually be a benefit in this particular situation to have that daily connection with the teacher with an academic focus for 2.5 hours. They'd have a remote special opposite of that. We'd be able to transition the hybrid teacher back in as a classroom teacher, unless we had a real large number of kids go remote. We feel based on our numbers there, we're going to be able to do that. So this is a little bit different spin on how to approach kindergarten. And we're actually looking for, that's why we're actually looking for a little more time, a couple more weeks, because I think we'd have to reach out to families a little bit, get their thoughts about it, because obviously going to a half-day setup, you know, would be a big change for people that we'd have to give them some time and some opportunity to give us some feedback on. So in the end, the proposal for transition would be transitioning K1 1 and 2 on January 11th, transitioning kindergarten on the 19th, give us a little more time to look at that half-day model, get some parent feedback, and maintain the half-day Wednesdays to the district. But as I've said, my specific recommendation to the committee is that we hold the course through the holiday season. And the second part of this is, you know, there isn't a lot of school days. There's a decent number. There's 3 weeks after Thanksgiving. But between our next meeting, it seems like a long time away, but it's not that far away. And we are, right now, we're going to recommend to have one meeting in December. That's what we agreed to, as a meeting on December 10th. And from my perspective, I actually don't think it's, obviously if the committee makes a decision to vote forward and set dates, we'll move forward with that plan. If the committee accepts my recommendation, I really think it would be beneficial. I think it's a little bit of a disservice to the community, to teachers, to everyone, that if we're discussing this every 2 weeks. Because I think it creates a little anxiety actually for everybody across the community of when is this going to happen? And I think that we should really at least agree to table the discussion until after the holiday break. So that is my recommendation, and with that, I'll turn it over to the committee.
Okay, thank you, Scott. So we've had a very thorough and comprehensive update from our superintendent on that, and a well thought out recommendation. I'm going to open it up to our committee members for comment on this, or questions or anything. Does anybody have anything on this? Let me look down the.
I think Jason raised his hand.
Jason, okay, okay, Jason, go ahead if you did. I didn't see you. Is he there? Jason.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I got booted. I lost all sound during that presentation, so I'm not a panelist anymore.
Oh,
Okay,
no.
all right, give me a second. Let me.
Yeah, I had to read.
Scott, can you repeat all of that?
All right.
You should be able to turn your video on.
Yeah, it still says unable to do it, but am I here now?
You're here. We can hear you. And let me,
You're there.
1 second.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. I'm not quite sure what just happened, but am I going first or someone else going?
Yeah, do you have a
Just
comment
because you
first?
raised your hand, you can go first.
Okay, I'll go. And I apologize if some of this is redundant since I missed a good portion of that again on technology. So the first thing I want to acknowledge is that I know every single person is desperate to get back to normal. I would love nothing more to have every single kid in every single district be inside of school. I would love to be able to go to a restaurant, go to the store without a mask. We're desperate to return to normal. I want every kid back in school. And I think every single person who's watching this, who's reading this, agrees. We want the kids back in. But I think with these DESE guidelines, it all comes down to those two words, if feasible. And there's a lot here that's not feasible, in my opinion. Just looking at the metrics for this week, we were over 4% positivity rate. That means we're about 5 or 6 positive tests away from being in red. We were as close as we can be to being a red town this week. And like we said, we already talked about the numbers are going up, but it's really close. And then and what Scott said about schools are being asked to go down to 3 feet, but when we're at the Shaws, we still have to stand on those stickers that are 6 feet apart. Why and with all the other guidance that has come out, with the in-person gatherings, the outdoor gatherings, everything is trending one way, but schools are trending the other. And I don't understand why. And when it comes to this situation here, I have a very, very difficult time being able to look at a staff member and say, we expect you to have 18 to 20 people in your room all day, but you can't have 10 family members at Thanksgiving dinner. Because those are both guidances that came from the state. And that alone sits terribly with me. I just don't understand because it seems very contradictory. I think right now the timing with the holidays, I mean, the travel order, which Mr. Neef sent out to all the families last week, I believe, that's not guidance. That is a mandate. So if people find out, and by people, I don't know if it's Board of Health, I don't know if it's the state, I don't know who actually monitors this, but there are fines involved, $500 per person per day for people who don't follow these travel orders. And we know people are going to be traveling. We know people want to travel. We know people are going to travel. The governor even came out today and said he's surprised by he's encouraged by all the people being tested, but when people are being asked, it's because they're planning on traveling. That's something else that came out of the governor's stuff today. So the timing of all this is really tough. I'm nervous. I think, and I agree, there hasn't been evidence that this spreads in schools. And that's because we've done so well with the precautions. And not just Carver, all over the place. We're doing the 6 feet. We have capacity. We have lunch. Everything's spread out. We don't give the virus a chance to spread in school. And adding more students, I think we're gambling. And I think Scott mentioned something like this right before I lost the sound. It's a risk to add more students when we've been doing so well. And again, we don't know that adding more kids will have a detrimental effect or that it won't have any effect. We don't know. It's a risk. It's a gamble. And it's a gamble that I'm not willing to take. And a lot of the things that I have written down here have already been said by Scott, but I want to bring up one last, and this has been touched on a little bit. A lot of the feedback we've heard are kids need to be back in school. Kids need to be back in school. I agree, but what does it actually look like when a K-2 student is back in school? We heard about it from the high school, but right now, the guidance hasn't changed on the actual classroom. So there's still a 6-foot difference between the instruction and where the students are. You know, in a typical classroom, we'd have small groups. We'd be able to use manipulatives. We'd be able to do station work where we can share all the things. None of that can happen. And I think when we hear people say we need to get people back in school, the idea is we can just have everyone in and return to normal, and we can't. So we'd be having, you know, let's say it's a double. So we have 9 or 10 kids per class right now. If we have 18 or 20, we're going to have 18 or 20 5, 6, and 7-year-olds sitting in their little taped off desks for 5 hours at a time. I don't know many kids who can sit that long for a quarter of that time. And we're asking a teacher to monitor 20 students, upwards of 20 students at one time, trying to do individualized feedback for each student. Like in a traditional classroom, this time last year, we could have the small groups. We could do reading groups based on level. We can't do any of that. And I don't know how the computer situation looks inside of classrooms, but these students don't bring the classroom, these K2 students at least, don't bring Chromebooks back and forth. So we're not even looking at doing any sort of blended lesson unless something changes with expectations of having kindergarten, first, and second bring Chromebooks back and forth to school each day. There's just a lot going on. It would be great to have them in, but the learning, I feel more comfortable with staying where we are and having the teachers have that 9, 10 students where they can focus that feedback, you know, specifically to those kids. We're doubling the feedback without any extra, or I'm sorry, we're doubling the amount of students without any extra resources if we're sending more kids back. I'm very nervous about it. I'd love to see what happens after the holidays when we don't have to worry about the travel, when we don't have to worry about people who may have traveled and we don't know they did, both families and staff, because I think realistically, not everyone's going to report that they went to Rhode Island. They went over the border to Woonsocket for Thanksgiving. That breaks the travel order. And we just don't know. And then last, with the logistics, the lunch, the buses, I know it was on one of Scott's slides, but we didn't mention it. We're looking at least double runs, and that alone is going to take more time off of learning. If we have to do double, I doubt we'll have to do triple, but double runs takes time off learning on both ends of the day. So there's more, but I don't want to take up everyone else's time. Thank you for letting me talk for this long, and I'll yield. Thank you.
I was muted myself. Jason, if you have something else to say, you can add it in. It's okay.
No, I think just because I was starting to get redundant on what I was saying, and I didn't want to just keep repeating the same points, especially if Scott said them at the same time. But I guess the one last thing I'll say is, you know, right now I live this, you know, and I know James, he's in the school too. We've all been, you know, we've seen the schools, like planning a school, the schedule, the lunches and everything when things change mid-year is a hassle, and it is intense, and there are a lot of moving pieces. And when the moving pieces keep moving, there's never a good answer. So transitioning to in-person is just going to lead to this almost like a stalemate of chess, right? No one's ever going to win. We're going to keep moving back and forth. And it's a lot. So, and that's just by my pure experience, having to be one of those people who have to plan out these changes when it comes to schedules, rostering, you know, making sure that when a special ed student changes cohorts, that we have to make sure that they have services for changing the cohorts, or when all the classes change. So there's so much that goes into this. So even if the committee decided to do this, it can't be a quick turnaround. There is a significant amount of time that needs to go through to make this happen.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Anybody else like to comment on this? Stephanie.
Hi, thank you, Andy.
Yep.
I just want to say that I echo Jason's sentiments. I feel that now is not the time for us to focus on bringing more students back into the buildings. I think now is the time for us to focus on, you know, continuing to improve the hybrid model, maybe have them do some behind the scenes planning so that if this does happen in January, they're that much more prepared at that point. You know, I have some other concerns, you know, I mean, in terms of, like Jason had mentioned, the buses. Right now, the weather has been pretty great. How will those double bus runs look when we have snow on the ground? I mean, that will just add more delays and more to, you know, just there's so many minute details that go into transitioning models. And then plus, we know that some of the students would end up possibly in a different cohort, possibly with a new teacher, which would mean different classmates. So the student would have to build that rapport with the teacher. The teacher would have to build that rapport with the student. There's so many little things that we may not think of that will definitely affect the learning that's happening in those classrooms. Not to say that teachers can't talk and share information about a student that might have been in their group that's now in someone else's group, or in someone else, in one person's room and in someone else's room. But there are all these minute details that I feel right now wouldn't be an effective use of the time the kids have to learn, because it is limited now compared to how it has been in the past due to no one's desire. That is for certain. And I would love nothing more than for this to be over and for everyone to be in school. I cannot wait for that day. Literally, I cannot wait. I want to like go stand out in front of the schools that day and like have a sign and have balloons and celebrate and just stand there and cry with tears of joy that, the kids are able to get back into school. So I would not support transitioning to an in-person model beyond where we are right now in the hybrid model. Thank you to Scott for all of this information. It's a lot to process. I hope that the members of the community realize that I think we all feel like we'd love to have the kids back in school. If we weren't in the middle of a pandemic where we have cases rising all around us. And I think, like Scott had mentioned, that because the schools are doing such a great job of keeping that social distancing of 6 feet, that it's really helping, to prevent the spread at higher rates among the students and among the staff, because we are doing such a good job of managing that. And I'm not willing to risk anyone's safety or health, physical well-being, mental well-being at this time. So thank you for the opportunity to speak, Andy.
Thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome.
Okay, anyone else on this topic?
Guys, just for rough estimates on buses, if you simply just take our K-2 and add them in full-time for the 4 full days, we're going to need about 4 double bus runs. Again, that's just simple math. We'll have to look more closely once we get feedback on kids who swap from in-person to remote and all that. And we may see an uptick too of parents who can pick up and drop off 2 days a week, but may need the transportation for 4. But just looking at it simply, there'd be 4 buses that would need to do a double run right off the bat.
Okay, thank you, Brad. Jen, James, do you have anything on this before we move on? Jen?
I do, thank you. So I'll be completely honest that I am a little bit torn here. I'm not a little bit torn, I'm very torn. I still have this really strong conviction that the K-2 age population just doesn't learn well remotely. And so I'm very nervous about that age group losing a lot the longer we stay in hybrid with them. But with that said, I've taken the time to really, really read and hear all of the emails that I've been getting on all sides. And I know the rest of the committee members are too. I'm not trying to insinuate that you haven't. but I'm really trying to see all sides of the issues and put myself in each person's shoes. I did tour the schools today, and I talked to multiple teachers, and some of the comments that I got from some of the teachers, you know, it was comments like from multiple teachers, you know, they were just really surprised that they're not seeing a lot of behavioral issues in their classrooms in the hybrid model. You know, in past years, that a good portion of their day was spent dealing with behaviors and having to correct students or maybe pull somebody out or do whatever. And with the reduced number of students, there's less behavior issues. So they've so much more teaching time. Multiple teachers said that they are really appreciating how much more one-on-one time they're getting to spend with their students that they never could before when they had a larger classroom population. And they really feel like they're getting to learn their students' strengths and weaknesses so much in so much greater detail and able to customize learning plans, things that they couldn't do when they had a larger classroom. I had a teacher in the K through 2 population, you know, tell me that with the small amount of students on the hybrid, you know, they're able to have some play-based stations set up around the room, you know, with, you know, distancing, and if we were to bring full in person, all of that would go away because there would not be the space to do it safely. And I think it was Jason who said, you know, like what kind of classroom is that to put our kindergarten, first or second grader in, where, you know, they can no longer have a play-based station, you know, to work on some math, you know, because they can't move out their classroom anymore because there's too many kids. You know, when we had 20 kids in a classroom last year, teachers were able to configure desks in a U shape or in rows with desks pushed together so that there was still a lot of space in the classroom. And with the desks having to be spaced out, I mean, it is tight in there with just 9 and 10 desks. And, you know, some of these classes, one classroom I visited, I think it was a first grade classroom. They had 13 kids. This one particular teacher has a very uneven cohort. It's like 13 and then 8 on the other side. And so seeing like those 13 bodies, like I walked in and I was like, whoa, it's crowded in here. I can't, it's really hard to visualize 8 more kids in there. And this is from somebody who really believes that we need to get our kids back. And then the rising cases has me concerned. The other thing I want to say, and for any teachers that are listening to the call, almost every teacher I spoke to today reiterated to me how hard they are working and how much effort they're putting into making this work, and how much they're trying to constantly think of new creative ideas and ways. And I hope that people don't think that us discussing this means that we don't think our teachers are working, because I appreciate our teachers so much, and I know that they are working harder than they have ever worked. Like I personally, I can't speak for the other community members, but I'm fairly certain they would echo my sentiments. I do not for 1 minute think that our teachers are not working hard, and that, you know, if they're hesitant to bring kids back full time, it's because it'll be more work, or, you know, they don't. I know that our teachers are working immensely hard. And the only reason why I keep bringing this up as a discussion is because I'm really just focused on the kids and how the kids learn. And I want to make sure we're giving our kids the absolute best education that we can. And honestly, after, you know, the last 2 weeks of really reflecting over things and the knowledge that I've learned, I feel like maybe right now we are giving our kids the best education, given the fact that we're still dealing with a virus with rising cases. Our town's at its almost highest case count, you know, active case count since this whole thing began. I don't want to bring them in to have to take it away. I don't want to continually transition them, because that's not going to be healthy for them. I think a lot of this Jason said, so I don't want to, you know, be super repetitive, but I'm just super torn. I'm not sure where I stand if somebody makes a motion. I don't know how I'll vote. But I just felt like I needed to share that so people could kind of appreciate, you know, where I'm at with things. But this whole thing continues to be the hardest thing that we've ever done. And there's no right or wrong answer. I think it's so conflicting that Governor Baker tells us bring the kids back in, but then they don't change our guidance at all. So, you know, we're going to have kids, you know, eating lunch in hallways and gymnasiums and, you know, all over the place. You know, we're going to have, like, it's just, I don't know. It's like, it's the round peg in a square hole situation again, like what he's asking us to do and the mandates that he wants us to do it, and they just don't fit. And so until the mandates of the guidance changes, I don't know how we do this safely and in a way that's gonna, I mean, every child that I saw in schools today, high school and elementary school, were so happy. And I want to make sure they stay that way. And I would love to say, yeah, well, they're going to be happier if they're in school more, but I don't know that that's true, because I also watched a student get really nervous as she entered a classroom and another student was going over to get hand sanitizer and he came within a certain distance of her and she, whoa, hey, back up, I'm right here. Like, you know, and so even a lot of our students are nervous in this environment, and we double that student population. You know, now those students are forced to go remote because they don't feel comfortable anymore, and they lose out. And I think if we're thinking about our entire population, which we have to, I just don't know.
Okay, thank you, Jen. I think we all understand that and your thoughts. Let me see. James, there you are. Okay, sorry, I had to scroll up.
And yeah, I have so many thoughts running through my head through this whole thing. I don't even know where to put them all in a sense that they would make sense in speaking about what we're talking about. Because I was there very adamant. And Scott, I want to say that I appreciate you setting up that time frame and setting up something that would give us some sort of scope of what we would be looking at if we were to move forward with something like that. I still firmly believe, as you do though, that in-person is the best way. But I gotta say, I'm gonna reiterate a lot of what you guys said. It's really hard being in a building and seeing what's going on right now and seeing all these students that are getting affected by close contact and having to be taken out, and the nurse's job that's involved in trying to keep track of all of this and follow all of this without any of that guidance changed. To reiterate what Jen just said, it doesn't make any sense of how you could fathomably make it occur. I think a lot of people out there may want to hear different right now, but everybody needs to understand, and we appreciate all the opinions and information that you're sending us. But for every opinion that you send, there is a counter opinion. And data about 80% of people wanting to bring their kids back to school, I don't think is current and necessarily relevant. And I think that that's something that was done a while ago when circumstances were very different, because even right now today, the governor made a big shift in circumstances the day after our last meeting. And I think between now and then, there are so many mixed messages being sent, exactly as you have all been saying, that I don't understand how they fathom that this is the right thing when so many other things are being pushed away and pushed apart. And you've got a lot of families who are going to be going on vacations and taking off, and they're going to do it. And they're, you know, it's their choice to do that. But that's going to make it very difficult for your situation. And the only thing I could see starting something right now is really just going to make it far more difficult for everybody involved. There may be parents who really want their kids into school right now, but I will tell you one thing that has bothered me through this conversation and the meeting through the beginning is the sort of hype of the hybrid model and the opportunities that will be lost if we stop that. I completely disagree. I get there may be benefits coming from the hybrid model, but I have no desire to start looking this as a trend and a method and a way to do things that's going to improve education. That's an aspect of this conversation tonight that sort of bothered me to an extent, because I get that there are positives, but as somebody who's in the business, I want those kids in front of me, all of them in front of me every day. I don't care what hybrid offers me and the opportunities that it offers. They don't equal what's offered by a full-time in-class situation, because it's not just about the academia. There's a social aspect to school that kids need and are missing with what's going on. And the hybrid model isn't going to give them that aspect that they need. So although I appreciate what everybody's putting into it, because I understand the difficulties in it, every teacher that's out there, no matter what anybody says, I would hate to hear any parent saying that they're not working hard, because they're exhausted, and it's exhausting, and it's a transition. Everything is a constant state of transition, and that makes it really difficult. And I think if you start, I'm in a building, and I'm in a building with half the number of students. If you throw every kid in that building right there, the point is you can't do that without releasing some of the guidelines. There literally is no way, whether it's busing, whether it's cafeterias, whether it's just kids in the hallways, kids in the bathrooms, whatever you look at, bringing every kid into that building is not going to work without a release of guidelines. And that doesn't exist, and it's not gonna. And I don't think it's fair to the staff, and I'm not putting this as they're the reason to not. I really think that it's not fair to the staff to put that expectation of how they're going to have to deal with that, and then possibly in a couple of weeks change it back again because the numbers jump up and now we got to switch back to either full remote or back to hybrid. And I agree with you that at this present time, I don't think the transition is appropriate, because I think there's too many variables that are existing right now that could create problems that we can't even understand right now. And I think it's really hard for parents who are sitting at home with their children, frustrated, struggling, having a really hard time getting all of this to work, to understand what it's really like in that building, and to try and bring all those kids back and do what teachers and administration and staff would be asked to do. And I just don't understand how, without any release of regulation, we think that could occur in an effective way. I think K-2 is a priority focus still, but I would agree with you that I don't think right now is the time. I would say that I think, I'm not sure if I'm getting your impression, Scott, about talking about it in January. Is that in a reference to say that we wouldn't discuss this or look at what's going on in December as well, and seeing how things change?
Yeah, so from my perspective, I'm making a recommendation that we'll look at the weekly metrics, because we've been doing that, and just see where the cases are. But we wouldn't have, I'm looking for a recommendation to not have a formal agenda item called transitioning back K1 and 2 on the December agenda. Because like I said, I just feel like it creates a lot of anxiety and stress for people, and I don't know how different the situation is going to be on December 10th. And I'm saying maybe there's an opportunity that it will be different on January. I think I'm going to propose that we haven't actually established 2 meetings for January yet. That's a later agenda item, but I'm going to propose a meeting on January 7th. And on January 7th, we can look to see where we are and have that discussion again. And we're still in a position, we're planning to transition. So I want the community to know, we've had a lot of active discussions where we're saying, we can do this. I'll commit to that timeline of we can do this in a couple of Mondays after our meeting. So whenever the committee votes to decide to do it, it's going to be a little over 2 weeks, and we can start that transition. But I just think it wouldn't be healthy for anybody, almost maybe emotionally, to say, okay, on December 10th, we're going to set agenda item of transitioning K2. Let's discuss again. But obviously, I want the committee to get the committee's opinion on that.
Well, I guess just from a logistical sense, it makes the dates that you've presented slightly irrelevant, because there's no way on January 7th you're going to talk about starting back in
the dates
January 11th.
The dates are really, if someone made a motion tonight and said, nope.
Tonight.
Yeah, we're against, we're going in a different direction than your recommendation, and we want to move forward with in person. Then we are still suggesting that we wouldn't do that in this time because of, the 2-week window that I put with Thanksgiving was December 14th. Then there's only 8 more days before the break, and then it's another 2 weeks. Well, it's a little week and a half with the holiday break. We're a little concerned about the travel piece. That's why we picked January 11th instead of January 4th. January 4th is that first day back, and we just had a concern that travel piece over the holiday break may become the same issue of, people are going away, they're not coming back, they're not tested, then we might go full in person, but we may not have everybody there because we're asking people to follow the guidance on travel. That's why we picked the 11th instead of the 14th. That's why we picked January 11th instead of January 4th. And we just felt like it didn't make sense to have kids come full in person for the 8 days before the holiday break. But I'm saying if we discuss this again on January 7th, we could pick some dates soon after that again if that was the will of the committee. Because I'm also not saying we should just put this, I hear everybody's concerns, and I agree with you, James. If I was saying the message that I'm trying to sell the hybrid model as the best way to educate kids, that wasn't my intention.
No, I'm not saying that you presented that aspect, and I'm not saying anybody presented the aspect that it was the best way to do it. But what I'm saying is there was a lot of conversation tonight about all the opportunities that would be lost if we remove that. And I disagree that opportunities lost through hybrid could be outweighed by getting all kids back in school. That's all I'm saying with that.
Yeah, so really, the purpose of my recommendation is to say we'll look at this again after the holiday break, and let's not have it be a December agenda item, because I actually think that would be a little healthier for everybody.
I can say, Andy, that because I kind of posed that question, there was a little bit more to what I was saying, but in our last meeting, I was very much for that because I believe that in these 2 weeks, there has been shifts and there has been changes. And I know that a lot of people say, well, we're Carver. We don't care what other towns do. We have to look at what we do. And I truly get that. I understand that. And to imply otherwise is kind of silly. I have children in the system as well. But I think the point is you're not seeing anybody else go back full time because it's not working. It's not the thing to do right now. And if it was, there would be a lot of other districts doing it. And they're not. And I think what we've seen more of are districts are shifting out of either full or even hybrid to more full online and full remote. So I get that our town is our town for us to choose what to do, but in the same sense, that doesn't negate what others are doing around us as a place to get opinions and get ideas and see what's going on. And I think the point is about what other districts are doing around us. If nobody else is doing it, there's a reason why. And it's because we're not ready for that situation yet. And I, Scott, have full faith in you as a member of this committee for a long time and knowing the dedication that you have to this district and are willing to do whatever this committee decides to do for this district, but also have a really good perspective of what you feel is the right thing to do for this district. And regardless of what part of me may disagree and want those kids back, I support you in what you were looking to do for this district and the families of this town, because I know that your perspective and interest is in the right place. And I know that you've got a better view and grasp of this whole situation more effectively than any of us do. And that doesn't mean that I would blindly follow whatever you say. As you know, that's not the case. But I do fully respect your input as far as having a great perspective of what really is best for the families of Carver, because I think that you sincerely put that in your forefront all the time. And so you have my support and your recommendations for what you choose to do.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, James. Jen.
Thanks. I just wanted to make one clarifying point. James, I completely agree with pretty much everything that you said. I wasn't trying to promote, I actually, the hybrid model was the model I liked the least, and I still probably like the least, but it was the best compromise and the best way, I think, to allow some in-learning person while maintaining CDC guidelines of 6 feet. I think the point that I was trying to make is that like we were saying, with the current mandates that we still have to comply with, a full in-person return isn't going to look like teaching did a year ago. Teachers can't break the kids out into small groups and go around and do, things that they would normally do in that full classroom setting, but they can mimic it in a different way, having a smaller amount of students. So it's more of, I guess, just pointing out that teachers are making the best of this, and they're really capitalizing on some of the benefits of having a smaller class size, which was one of the reasons why I supported hybrid to begin with, because while I knew it was the most difficult model and I didn't really like it, I really hoped that those in-person days would be so much more qualitative because of the small student to teacher ratio, that it would sort of make up for where it lacks in other aspects in the challenges with remote. So I just wanted to make that point of clarification, that I'm not trying to sell hybrid. I'm not. So thank you.
Andy, just let me put something in there real quick.
Yeah, James, go right ahead. Thank you,
Jen, I mean, sincerely, I know Jason gets bothered when we use personal experience, so I apologize, Jason, but being someone who's involved in the hybrid model, it's going fantastic. I'm having great success with it. Would I rather have kids in school every day? 1,000%. Is it more exhausting to have kids in school every day? 1,000%. But it's not an implication in any way of what you said. It was something that I've heard like several times throughout the meeting from different people. So it just sort of kept bouncing up in my mind as I get it, because again, it's grown to a sense where everybody's becoming more comfortable with it. As I said, adaptation is a, it's a pathway to success. But my fears from the beginning of this whole thing is that hybrid model is going to be something that is going to make people, it might not be something that goes away as soon as we would want it to. So it was in no way directed at any one individual, just several comments that were heard throughout the meeting that sort of were promoting the opportunities that could be lost without it. And that just sort of stuck with me in a weird way. That's all I was saying with that.
All right, thank you, James. Let me look around real quick. Okay, does anybody else have anything else before I put a comment out there and move on with Scott's recommendation? Okay, I don't see anything. All right, I'm going to make a quick comment. Just I echo everything my fellow committee members have said. I've been an advocate for getting kids back full from the very beginning, but in doing so, I wouldn't want to risk anyone. I don't want to see anyone get sick, obviously. And I mean, if we were still at near 0%, or very isolated cases in the town, I would say, okay, well, we're very, very low rates, but we are seeing rates go up. I mean, we're almost at 5% right now, and unfortunately, hopefully that goes back down soon. Do all those 5% or 4% plus affect the school? No, they don't. But the bottom line is, and I actually turned my video off a little while ago, and I went and got the school calendar that I had on my refrigerator. And I mean, I can't, traditionally, the chairman doesn't make motions, but Scott had asked about basically tabling this topic until possibly our next meeting on January 7th. I mean, not our next meeting, our meeting on January the 7th. We're going into holiday break for Thanksgiving, and then we're going to have the Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year's break. And but the holidays don't just go on Christmas and Hanukkah for December. I mean, they go all the way into New Year's. And when you look at this, I mean, if we have a meeting on the 7th, the first day back from the New Year's break, and people go away on New Year's too and do things with their family on New Year's as well, I mean, that's only 3.5 days until our next meeting after they get back from that. So with sometimes having a positivity, an incubation time of 14 days, honestly, as much as it kind of goes against what I really want to do if things were perfect, I would suggest that we not talk about this on the 7th, but extend it out to the 21st. January 21st. That would give you over a full 14 days, and that would actually give us a much clearer picture, and if the holidays actually affected our populace more than we thought. You know, because the way I look at it is, if we decide to talk about this and decide something on 7th, that's only 3 days, you know, that since people maybe had been out with their family. And the bottom line is, everybody wants to see their family. I know what the governor's saying now, and it sounds ridiculous to us that grew up in a free nation, and I'm not for it at all, about limiting family and everything like that, but I understand the reasoning, but I don't like it. But let's call a spade a spade. People are going to go see their families. People are going to go see their friends. We all know it, okay? I think erring on the side of caution would be better in this circumstance until numbers come down. And when numbers come down again, and that's, you know, more of a reliable, on the downswing reliably, I think we could look at that, you know, and I think doing so on the 21st would be prudent. But that's, but I can't, well, traditionally I can't make motions, but that's what I would suggest. So in saying that, I will open up the possibility of a motion to the rest of the committee if someone wants to make one on this topic, or on Scott's recommendation. Stephanie.
Are you asking for a motion for a table?
Yeah, Scott was asking about tabling this topic until at least the 7th.
Yeah, so ultimately, to stay in the hybrid model, we don't need a motion per se. But I was really just looking for some affirmation from the committee that we would table this topic to the 7th. We can do that through a motion, but we don't have to. It's really not.
Yeah, we don't have to do a motion for tabling.
You don't have to do a motion. We could just move on from the topic without a motion, and that would keep us in the hybrid model because we're not changing anything.
All right.
But I just, as long as people realize that, you know, my intention would be to not bring this back until after the holiday break.
Right, and I mean, I put the agenda together with Scott, and I mean, it was under my suggestion that we put the K through 2 on it each week because things were so fluid, and we were kind of on the lower end of it for a while, and it just seemed like a topic that people wanted to know about and wanted to have us discuss. But I also do understand that it causes stress within the community, within the school, with the staff, you know, with parents and everything like that as well. I mean, you've seen the emails we've gotten, you know, so do we need a motion for that? I mean, or just not put it on the.
In my opinion, we don't need a motion, but I just want to make sure. But we could have one, but we don't need one. It's not required.
Wait, well, let me just ask then. Are all of you okay with me not putting this back on the agenda until January?
As long as we're still reviewing metrics and reviewing, you know, things in general, I'm okay not discussing this particular topic again until January, because I agree. I think a lot of parents are uneasy. Are things going to be switching? When are they going to be switching? You know, teachers are uncertain, not knowing what's going to happen. And I just think, you know, if people know we're staying the course until at least that time, you know, they can have, you know, just some level of like, okay, this is what it is, and they can, you know, focus on the holidays and whatever else they need to do for their families.
Exactly. Okay. Anyone else?
Andy, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm sorry, Stephanie, go ahead.
No, it's fine. Go ahead, Andy.
Okay. I'm not really addressing that as much as I'd like to address. I don't know who our audience necessarily is right now, but you know, regardless of when we discuss this, if this transition is going to happen, one of the reluctant issues right now is not changing the guidance. So if we're relooking at this in January and we're looking at bringing the kids back and the guidance still hasn't changed, we're going to be facing some of the same issues. So I think if I can make a recommendation to anybody who is listening out there and would like to see things change, it's to start calling your representatives, start calling your governor, and start calling the local government to look at making some changes with that guidance, because it's going to be too difficult to make that transition in the busing alone without a shift in what the expectation is with that shift. So I just don't think that, you know, we can look at it whenever we want, but I think the school, the district, and the administration is put in a really difficult place to try and have us say, okay, start bringing all these kids back, but you can't change how you have to do social distancing. You can't change the reporting system. You can't change your busing requirements. You can't change cafeteria requirements. You can't change the fact that you can't use all the manipulatives and kids have to sit all facing the same direction and all these regulations that like would be almost literally impossible to manage if you brought every kid back into that building. So I think, regardless of what discussions we have, there has to be sort of a better shift from the upper levels as opposed to what the guidance to do in case that scenario starts to happen is. Because you can't shift one thing and not the other and expect the gears to work right.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, James. Stephanie?
I do. I agree with what James just said. I just feel like if we're agreeing to not revisit a topic that's been on the agenda for, I don't even know how many weeks now. It's been months, I'm sure, right? I know we're all in this space and time continuum. I'm just wondering if it would make sense for us to have some type of a motion about tabling this so that we all know, we can all vote. That way we're all on the same page. I would just rather see it more formalized.
More official?
Yeah. Jason, I know Jason. Sorry, Andy, you should have said Jason, not me. Sorry.
That's okay. Well, I have to scroll through my thing here to see everybody. Okay, Jason?
I'd like to suggest that when you and Scott set the agenda for the first January meeting, because I know you do that several days beforehand, or however beforehand, that you do a call for agenda items, and then we can actually put in our suggestion whether this should be on there or not, because we don't know by, let's say that happens on January 1st, whatever. We don't know what might happen between now and January 1st. It might not be a necessity, but it might be. So I think if we do a call for agenda items for that first January meeting, then we can each give our input and then it'll decide whether it gets onto the agenda or not for the first one in January. Does that make sense? I think
it does make sense.
That might be.
No, it does make sense.
I think that's the most prudent course, in my opinion.
I agree with you, and and I apologize to the committee. I've been remiss in the last couple months about sending out calls for agenda items from fellow committee members, even though they know they could always contact me. But that's something I started, and I wanted to continue doing that. So thank you for that reminder, Jason. Okay, so if someone wants to make a motion for a more of an official tabling of this, and I just wanted to make sure people understand, it's not that we don't want the kids back in school, and I want to make sure people understand that by explaining this, with the holidays coming up, with the time span that is short between holidays, I want to make sure people understand that we're not shirking our responsibility in this topic by not having on the agenda, but because of those dates are so near themselves, and it's a big family time and friend time, and you're going to be around, maybe not everybody, but some people are going to be around a lot of people, and so it just gives us time to see what the effect of that will be, and without the stress of this being on the agenda every time, but with looking at the metrics ongoing. We can always call another meeting. Jason, go ahead.
I'll make a motion that the district stay in hybrid model at this time, and we next discuss the possibility of transitioning students back to our school during a January meeting.
Okay. We have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. And, okay, we'll do roll call vote then. James?
James O'Brien, aye.
Jen?
I'm my mouse went crazy. Jen Pratt, aye.
Stephanie?
Stephanie Clarity, aye. Those the mice, right?
Oh.
Sorry.
Yeah. Jason?
Jason Greenwood, aye.
Okay, and Andy Carter, aye as well. Like I said, we're not forgetting this topic. We're going to be keeping an eye on this, but I agree with Scott that, just kind of cutting down on the stress of having this on the agenda every other week, at least for the foreseeable future, might be wise, I think. All right.
And I'll make sure we'll do the metrics as we've been doing on the December meeting.
Exactly. All right. Thank you. And thank you very much for all the conversation. It was very well thought out. And, you know, I just want to say one more thing on this. There have been several points on this topic, and Scott has said it, and James has said it, and everybody said it. Jen, Stephanie, Jason. The state basically has said to us, you know, it's up to us. But in almost every other aspect of what's going on with the public, they've made hard and fast rules. So basically, what they're doing with school kids is they're playing, you know, CYA, basically. And they're putting it down to the local level. And that's fine. That's our job. But, you know, so that's why we're acting prudently, because we have to. Like I said, we don't want anyone to get sick, whether it's, you know, the kids, the parents, the grandparents, anyone, the staff, anybody. So that's why we are acting in a cautious manner. All right, so we'll move on to item E, snow days.
The snow days. DESI has approved districts using remote days in place of snow days this year. They're only approving that for this year, so it's not a rule that's going forward into the future. They said they'll readdress it next year about future years. And ultimately, you know, it's still the superintendent's decision as you come up the night before. And you know, Carver, based on the types of storms Carver has, a lot of times we lose power in this community. So obviously, I'm still going to be making that decision and looking at what's happening and making the decision the night before or that morning on whether we need to have a snow day based on what the type of storm is. But it is my intention, if possible, to use a remote day as well. So I wanted to make the committee aware, unless people had an objection to that, like any other snow day, to have the discretion to either call a remote day or call a snow day based on what the situation warrants. If we were going to do a remote day, what my intention is to use the half-day Wednesday schedule. I think that's the remote schedule that everyone knows. They do it on a regular basis. If I made a phone call at 8 o'clock the night before and said, tomorrow's going to be a remote day and we're going to follow the Wednesday remote day schedule, that everyone would know what that is and be prepared to do that. And like I said, that doesn't preclude us from having snow days if the situation warrants. But I wanted to make everybody aware that DESI has approved districts doing that.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Jason, had your hand up?
Yeah, you mostly answered it, but are we gonna put this out to the community saying like this will be the language for this situation?
Yes.
'Cause I think there'll be a lot of confusion the first couple times.
Yeah, so my intention is after tonight to, you know, probably next week sometime before we get into snow season, you know, send an email or a letter out to the community explaining that's, you know, explaining in a little more detail what I just said.
I got you. I just wanted to just.
Yep.
Okay, James.
Scott, I appreciate that too, but I think you know, you kind of hit the nail on the head though. I think a lot of people have a hard time fathoming that idea of social equity, which is what school is really designed for. You know, if you're in a town where you've got a lot of walkers and the sidewalks aren't cleared, you can't have school because it's not equitable because those kids can't get into school. I think, as you've stated, like I can't remember too many times in Carver where school has been canceled and somebody isn't without power. So I get the enthusiasm to do those remote days as long as we're making sure that things remain in that equitable sense, because again, I can't remember a storm where school's been canceled where somebody in Carver hasn't lost power in a fairly general sense.
Yep. Just so the Eversource puts out information pretty timely, and I use that app a lot. So you can go on to Eversource's website and they'll give you localized power outages. They'll give you the exact number. They'll actually tell you the exact number of households out in Carver. So you can go on to, and I pretty much think everyone has Eversource. There might be a few, you guys would know better than I do. I think there might be some, I don't know if, I think the majority of the town has Eversource as their power source. So they really do put out timely information. I do use that when I'm calling snow days. So, you know, I'll look at that app and see how many households are out. And we'll definitely take that into consideration in terms of snow days versus remote days.
Okay, Does anybody else have anything on this? Jason, did you have your hand up again? Okay. Stephanie, anybody? Okay. We'll move on with that. So there's no objection to that, Scott, except for the power outage.
Yeah, I'll be very careful about the power outage situation.
Okay. And so then we move on to recommendations from the superintendent, school committee meeting schedule.
So in August, we agreed to meet bi-weekly through November. And then we actually agreed we'd only have one meeting in December, because if we went bi-weekly, it would be December 3rd and 17th. And back in August, no one felt like having a meeting on December 3rd. If I refresh your memories, the general sense was we didn't want to do 2 meetings in December, so we agreed just to do December 10th. Then we said we'll see where we are and make a determination if we need bi-weekly meetings for the rest of the year. So I've made a schedule with bi-weekly meetings through the rest of the year, except for June, just one meeting in June. Certainly we could alter this if the situation changes and warrants it. We could do less meetings. The reality is, generally the last few years during budget season, we've had 2 meetings in January and February anyhow. Yeah, sometimes more than 2 meetings in January and February. So this is just my proposed meeting schedule through the remainder of the year. I don't know if anybody sees any conflicts on that schedule or has any problems with it. And just checking to make sure you want to go bi-weekly through May.
All right. Jason has his hand up.
Don't hate me, guys. I'm going to do it. I love the bi-weekly. I would like to suggest that we go to Mondays, and here's why. And I know you guys are going to poo-poo it, but it's okay. But here's what I think. These metrics are coming out Thursday at 5. We meet Thursday at 7. And with big changes in metrics, that gives very, very little time for us to even come up with it. If plans change and metrics change, that's a 2-hour time frame to really change a background agenda and agendas that have been set for days. I really think, and I don't like Thursday nights, I've already made that very clear every single time, but I think doing an early week meeting where we have a couple days to digest the new metrics and make plans accordingly might be a better option. So I just want to throw that on the table. Go ahead and say no, but I just wanted to try.
All right. So we all heard Jason's suggestion. Does anybody want to weigh in on switching possibly to Mondays?
I'll take Tuesdays as well. Just saying.
Well, we might have a problem with conflicts with the select board.
Okay, that's fine. And I've always fought for Mondays anyways, but
We had Monday meetings for years. Last year was the first time we transitioned to Thursdays.
So Stephanie has unmuted herself. Okay, go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, I was gonna ask Scott, would switching to Mondays cause any conflicts for you?
Actually, I just scanned through it pretty quickly. It's actually pretty good. Assuming we didn't do January 4th, we did the 11th and 25th. And then we do the 8th and 22nd, which avoids February vacation.
Yep.
Do the 8th and the 22nd again in March. Then it would be the 12th and the 26th in April. And then the 10th and the 24th in May, and then June 14th. And so we don't hit any Monday holidays. We don't hit if we lay it out that way, we don't hit April or February vacation. It's fine.
Okay, my question was just to see if it worked for Scott's schedule, because I agree with Jason. I mean, if there is some big major announcement made on a Thursday at 5 p.m., we have 0 time to react to that.
Yeah, it does seem like the announcements are coming out on Thursdays, Fridays, sometimes on the weekends.
Yeah, I mean, so anyway, I am a fan of moving to Monday, so I would support Jason in that endeavor.
Mondays are fine with me.
James?
If I recall, I didn't vote for Thursdays when we switched anyway. I spent 8 years on Mondays, so I'm pretty indifferent. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay, Jen?
It's fine with me. I don't like Mondays, but I can be fallible.
Isn't that a song from the 80s?
Yeah, there was the Boomtown Rats, wasn't it?
I could recommend, if it's okay with everybody, keeping the 10th. Can we keep Thursday the 10th and then go to Mondays in January?
Do we need a motion for that?
Nope. We already approved Monday on the 10th. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess you could make a motion to say Mondays 2 days a week through May.
I mean, if we don't need it, I won't do it, but I didn't know.
Well, I can just bring back the new schedule on December 10th. I'll just bring this back on December 10th.
Perfect. Thank you.
We already
Thank
have
you. I appreciate it. I think that'll be good for us.
All right. All right, so that ends that. I have no problem with Mondays, but either way, it's fine. It works fine.
All right, we'll go.
Okay, so we move on to reports from the school committee. Does anybody have anything you'd like to impart on the community before we end? Let me see, I'm scrolling through. James.
Go ahead, Jen.
Oh, Jen, I didn't see you. All right.
Thank you. I just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving and just remind people to please be cognizant of your plans over the holidays and do your part to keep everybody safe. I want to once again thank all of our teachers and staff. Thank you to Scott and to Mike Schultz for bringing me around the Carver Middle High School this morning. I hadn't been in that building in a while. In that level of detail. I got to see a couple of my old teachers. It was fun. But I really, really, really loved seeing some of the classrooms real time, seeing some of the live streaming, getting to meet Mr. Aruda and Mrs. Waitner, and learning some of the pathways and seeing some of the technology that we have. It's really incredible stuff that's happening in that building. And it was really exciting to see it. And even getting to see the culinary room and the plans that they have for it. So there's a lot of positive things happening in that building right now, even in the midst of everything. And it was really nice to see in the elementary school, there's just such a vibe at the elementary school. It's just happy. And it was really great to tour a bunch of the classrooms and see the children learning and seeing, just everybody making the best of the situation we're in. And so I'm just so thankful for all the teachers that we interrupted your lessons. I'm sorry, but thank you. And so that was all I want to say. And everyone have a happy and safe Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Jen. James?
So this has always been notoriously one of my favorite holidays coming up. And I know some people talk about the stress of cooking and preparing, and I never find cooking stressful. I find it very peaceful. And it's a relaxing holiday because it's based on family, friends, food, and football. And that's really what the day is all about. There's not a lot of pressure and stress in it. And to me, it's always kind of like the gun at the beginning of a race. Because Thanksgiving sort of leads into decorating for Christmas and then the holiday rush. And it's just sort of the beginning of everything. And it's always been one of my favorites. I really hope people are conscious of what's going on these days and definitely take the time to enjoy their family and the break and do whatever they can, but also to be aware of what's happening in our society and when you are going away and making the right decisions and sending your children to school and we're about to head into flu season and we're about to head into windows closed and doors closed, and it changes things. Last year was a horrible flu season. It was more variations and strands of the flu going around throughout the whole season. So I understand the frustrations everybody's going through and the difficulties in this process, whether you believe in it or not. But I hope particularly teachers get a sense of relaxation from the fact that they're not wondering, are we going back full? Or are we going to do this and have to wait every 2 weeks to see what the result is going to be? I think we've given them a sense of opportunity to maybe relax through the holidays and just sort of focus on them and their job and the students and not what comes next. So we do that with full appreciation for everything that they're doing for our families and our children. And I just want to wish, as Jen said, everybody has a peaceful, relaxing holiday and break through this whole strange experience that we're going through.
Thank you very much, James. All right, who's next? Anyone? Jason, Stephanie, have anything? Stephanie.
Thank you. I want to echo what both Jen and James said. I toured both the middle high school and the elementary school earlier this week, and it was really a wonderful experience on so many levels. It was also a sad experience on so many levels. Seeing what it would, what the effects would be if we were to bring students in on a full-time basis before guidance changed. But I'm very thankful and very grateful for the opportunity. And I hope that everyone realizes that we're cognizant of how hard everyone's working. This isn't an easy situation for anyone. And the students that I saw, like the joy, you could just see that they were thankful to be in school. And I think had you asked them all that, if they were joyful to be in school a year ago, I'm not so sure that their response would have been as many yeses as I think it would be right now, because I think that they really appreciate the opportunity to have some of that socialization and to have had the opportunity to play sports as they have had. Oh, which reminds me, was there news about, sorry, Scott, was there news about the golf? What happened with golf?
With golf?
Yes. Were they waiting for the results of another match to find out who they were going to play?
No.
No, that was
Not yet.
that was soccer.
Oh, soccer. I was so quick. I thought I don't know. I thought it was golf.
Actually, unfortunately, I intended to get to the soccer game today. I didn't get to it. The soccer team actually played Rockland today.
Okay.
In the league finals. That was the last game. It was the championship for the league because there's no statewide tournament this year.
Yeah.
They were supposed to play Cohasset on Monday. Cohasset, unfortunately, had made a decision to go remote this week. Did not field the team, which is, and so then our soccer team moved on and played Rockland in the league championship today at 4:00. I honestly don't know how. I intended to get to the game. I didn't get there, so I don't know what happened.
Don't know the results.
Well,
okay, sorry.
I'm sure there's many people out there right now.
Who might know? Yeah.
What the score is.
Yeah. Anyway. Okay. Sorry.
And actually, winter sports, and not supposed to be looking at our phones, but someone just texted me the score. It was 5-1 Carver. Someone else just texted me the score on Carver won 5-1.
Oh, that's excellent! Yay!
Hey, congratulations.
Carver boys soccer team won 5-1 today.
That's so awesome. Yeah. So I'm glad I mentioned it, even though it was the wrong sport that I was referring to.
Winter sports, the MIA board is meeting tomorrow to make a vote on winter sports, which will be released tomorrow afternoon. So for our next meeting, I'll have kind of an update on what's happening with winter sports.
Oh, that would be great. I look forward to hearing what the kids are able to do. So with that, I wish everyone a safe, healthy, and happy Thanksgiving. Please be safe, responsible, and enjoy spending what time you can with your family. And remember, Zoom's an awesome thing. It's better to see someone on Zoom than to not see them at all if you can't travel to where your family or your friends are. So anyway, with that, I will sign off. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Jason, did you have something?
Yeah, I'll just real quick. I was actually going to mention the sports too, but Stephanie stole my thunder. So thanks, Steph. That's all right. No, but thank you to everyone in the community. The passion we see from our community members, from the families, from the teachers is second to none. And we appreciate all the feedback. Remember to, stay safe, but also be kind to one another. Let's not forget about that. Even when we're differing on opinions on these things. That's an important thing to keep in mind. And with that, have a wonderful holiday, everybody.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, Jen, did Jen go?
She did.
She did. I'm sorry, Jen. I'm losing it. Okay, so it's me. All right, so I'd like to also thank everybody for attending our meeting tonight. I'd like to thank Area 58 for rebroadcasting our meeting. I'm sorry I was remiss on making sure it was recording at the beginning.
Yeah,
but
that's my fault too. That's a mental block for me for some reason.
it's all right. Well, me too. So, okay, so we'll do better with that. I want to thank everybody that emailed us in this last weeks about potential vote to bring K through 2 back. We really appreciate all of your emails. They're very important to us. Them seriously on no matter what side you're coming from on this. We value your opinions, and they do help us. So thank you for that, and keep them coming. I'm a little sad we won't have Thanksgiving Day football this year, but hopefully next year. And just on the holiday of Thanksgiving, just these things pop into my head. Just, it's easy to go through life and complain about what you don't have or anything, and I'm guilty of it. But myself, I am trying to be more thankful for the things I do have in my life and the people I have in my life. And because someone could be gone tomorrow. You just never know. And so be thankful for the people, not just the things in your life, and if I could make a suggestion. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And on my last hope for all of you is you get the right side of the wishbone when you make a wish from someone. If people still do that. All right. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. And our next meeting will be on
December 10th.
Oh, December 10th. I'm sorry. And with that, I would take a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second and a third before. Okay, well, it's roll call votes. I'll call Stephanie first.
Stephanie Clarity, aye.
Jen Pratt.
Jen Pratt, aye.
James O'Brien.
James O'Brien, aye.
And the very thankful for getting Monday meetings, Jason Greenwood.
So happy. Jason Greenwood. Aye.
All right. It's in Andy Cottarelli is aye as well. It's unanimous. And we are adjourned at 10:18. Have a great holiday, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care, everyone.